Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Asheville City Council meeting.
Add this to the fortress.
If you could just please take one moment and silence your cell phones. And if you haven't already and you want to speak tonight, you can go outside in the hall and sign up to speak. And probably most of you already heard that as you made your way into the chamber. We do have an overflow room. Maggie, do we have folks in the overflow room?
We do not have
No,
any,
not
but
yet.
it is open.
Okay. And if you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Given the number of baseball folks here, we should probably sing the national anthem, but we
Anyone?
forego that. All right, we have one proclamation this evening, and it is for Red Cross Month. And if you are here for this proclamation, please meet me down there. I'm going to read this proclamation, and then you'll feel free to say a few words. Our own Jerry, and you'll help to organize this. Whereas the American Red Cross, the humanitarian organization that eases people suffering during life's emergencies in Asheville, across the United States, and around the world. Whereas the American Red Cross chapter, serving Western North Carolina chapter, has a long history of helping our neighbors in need by delivering shelter, care, and hope during disasters, making our community safer through its life-saving home fire campaign, providing life-saving blood, teaching skills that save lives, and supporting military veterans and their families. Whereas we thank and honor the selfless volunteers, dedicated employees, and generous supporters who make this compassionate work possible. And whereas last year in Western North Carolina, 223 active volunteers helped 200 households affected by 181 local disasters, trained 8,289 people in first aid, CPR, and AED, babysitting, and other life-saving skills, collected more than 23,871 units of blood, and served 454 military members, veterans, and their families. Whereas people in our community depend on the American Red Cross, whose life-saving mission is powered by the devotion of volunteers, the generosity of donors, and partnership of community organizations. Now, therefore, I, Esther Manheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, do hereby proclaim March 2023 as Red Cross Month in the City of Asheville and encourage all to recognize the daily efforts and contributions made by the American Red Cross in our community and across our nation in its vital work to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for this important recognition for the Red Cross. And I know we're short of time, but I do want to say that for the Red Cross, everything that we do every day of the year, every week, every hour of the day is important, because our mission is to really be out there and alleviate human suffering and do all we can to prevent. And there are different ways that all of you here today can support that, and that can be three really simple ways that I'll just summarize. One, you can make a financial donation. Two, you can donate your time, like friends I have here today with me. There are our board members and board chair. And then three, the other thing that you can do also is help save a life by donating blood. So thank you very much, and reach out to us if you have any questions, in which also we can help you as well, help others. Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. I've got a request to pull item B from the consent agenda. This is the park facility and management and license agreement, so we'll talk about that in just, do you want a separate vote on that?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. So do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda except item B?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second, and
One,
let's see,
Antoinette, then Sage.
got it?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have anyone signed up to speak under the consent agenda, so we're going to go ahead and vote on the motion to approve the consent agenda except item B. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next, let me have a motion to adopt, to approve item B on the consent agenda.
So moved.
And then do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so I have a motion and a second, and then Councilwoman Roney, if you want to.
Yeah, I guess my outstanding questions for this agreement are layered in with the fact that we did spend almost $2 million of funding to acquire the property next door. My understanding was that we would benefit and have shared benefit between the two facilities, but now it looks like we are potentially paying up to $171,000 over the life of a potential 18-year lease, without me understanding fully what the programming would look like, if it was going to take capacity from our other facilities, which are in a lot of ways over-programmed and have some unprogrammed activity as well. So I'm not able to support it at this time.
So do we want D. Tyrell McGirt to, or do we have someone else who wants to speak on this item? I see them all the way in the back.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. For the record, I'm D. Tyrell McGirt, Parks and Recreation Director here with the City of Asheville.
And this was just maybe, on item B on our consent agenda has to do with the new park in South Asheville and the agreement with Carolina Day School. Do you want to say a few words just about that agreement?
So basically, yeah, the benefit for the City of Asheville and Parks and Rec is to have more field space. We know that we're pretty field poor, specifically as it relates to rectangle fields or multi-purpose fields, and having an opportunity to have additional access in South Asheville benefits the overall Parks and Rec Department operation. Just to spell out a few programs that we're currently operating out of Memorial Stadium, we have our programs, adult flag football, youth flag football. We also partner with some community groups to offer recreation, youth football, and cheerleading. We partner with Asheville City Schools to be able to host some of their athletic events. Asheville Lacrosse, Asheville Empire Lacrosse, Ultimate Frisbee, as well as once the track is in, we hope to have a track and field program. We have other youth football programs that want to utilize the space, field hockey, and then of course we have a number of pickup groups that utilize the space. So you can imagine all those demands on one particular space leaves a lot of people out a lot of times. So being able to have an additional space in another part of town helps Asheville Parks and Rec be able to provide more services to the people that live here.
And do we charge utilities or have utility memorandum of understanding or agreements when private schools use our public facilities?
Currently, not to my knowledge, but we do have similar agreements with Asheville City Schools and Buncombe County Schools for shared facility use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Thank you. All right, next we have, under presentations and reports, we have one report. That's the manager's report, and I'm going to turn it over to Deborah Campbell, our city manager.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm going to ask for I can't believe I just missed her name. Thank you, Kim Morgan Sachs, to come up and give the presentation on the American Rescue Plan Act. It is to update you on the funding that we received, and will provide kind of an update of where we are, particularly in terms of our contractual arrangements and the disbursement of the funding. So Kim, I apologize. Thank you. It's been a long day.
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you again. I feel like I haven't been here in a long time to update you. But I can assure you that it has been, the ARPA project has been moving along. We started, and I think the last time I spoke to you, we talked about the robust evaluation process. I'd like to add to that we've also done a lot of work on the performance aspect of these projects as they go forward, and what it looks like to work in partnership with the organizations that we selected. So we had 24 external projects, 3 City of Asheville projects. So the funded total at the moment is $24.9 million. And there was 18 from the May 22 council resolution. Up to this point, we have 18 of those projects under contract. 6 are still in process, and I will discuss those as we go forward a little bit further. The response to the kickoffs and the performance management structure has been positive. We have worked very hard on looking at the outcomes from the beginning to make sure that these projects are successful for us and the community as we go forward. So we've been trying to work in a different way, in partnership with the organizations. And I think having that freedom to discuss with us what they want to achieve and how to achieve it without too many restrictions as far as the performance is concerned has been a very positive thing. We continue to work with the city very closely, the county very closely, and we have 9 shared projects of the 15 external projects that you decided to go forward with in the resolution in May. We have 9 of them that are shared with Buncombe County. We have a bi-weekly meeting with Buncombe County, the Buncombe County team, and that includes for a number of these projects Dogwood as well, because Dogwood are involved in some of these projects. So we have regular meetings with all those organizations to move forward. Just as a reminder, this is the approved funding categories and the way that we did the evaluation score. It's just to go through again the eligible categories for the projects that you selected and voted on. So I think it's important to go through the timeline as well, because I know that we are over a year past the original RFP process, and coming up to a year since you made the decision in the May resolution. So I think it's important to talk about this process. After the initial funding awards, from July, we took a slight hiatus in June because of end of year and things like that, and not doing new contracts at that point. So from July through September last year, we had orientation meetings and a number of discussions to finalize draft contracts with the funding recipients. From September 2022 to November 22, we started the process of having the kickoff meetings. And those kickoff meetings are crucial to the process of how we measure the performance. So we had to, with the draft contracts prior to the kickoff meetings, get to the point where the recipients were comfortable with the scope of work, we were comfortable with the scope of work, and the Treasury were comfortable with the scope of work, because that was also an important aspect of this whole process that we were going through, is to make sure that we were adhering to the Treasury criteria and rules and regulations, which I think, as you know from the last meeting, they are an ever-moving feast as far as the rules and regulations. Plus also there was a major change as far as the Treasury was concerned. The dedicated staff that were working on the ARPA project from the Treasury perspective were disbanded in November last year. So the response times from any questions or anything to the Treasury is significantly longer since November. So sometimes when we put questions through the Treasury to see whether or not things are acceptable, it takes a long time to get the answers. But we've tried to mitigate that as much as possible and push forwards. From December, we completed nearly all kickoffs by the end of December. We were hoping to go a little bit faster than that, but various scheduling restrictions and things from us and our projects just made it a little bit slower, but I think we still got the majority of them done by the end of December. Once we had the kickoffs, we could then move to putting all the performance and the compliance reporting that was needed going forward into the contract. So we did draft contracts, first of all, then we did the kickoffs, and then the final draft contract that was had to be reviewed, both internally and externally, happened between December and March this year. So, and then from February, we did actually have some people under contract. Yay. So, it seemed to be a long, hard slog to get to that point, but actually I think we were very diligent and we followed the process closely. We learned from Buncombe County because their first set of contracts that went through had to be rewritten. And their second batch of contracts, we worked closely with them to make sure that our contract, their contract, and the Treasury stipulations were very, very closely adhered to. We're on pace with Buncombe County's second set of contracts. And their first ones, they are still trying to rewrite and restructure according to the process. So, as far as our implementation process is concerned, we divided the subrecipients into groups so that we could stagger the onboarding, because again, we had to go through the draft contracting, the kickoff, and then finalizing the performance part from this. Each group went through that process, then they had the kickoff. After the kickoff, the contracts were finalized and signed, was the idea, and then projects are initiated at that point. There is ongoing weekly and monthly partnership conversations that are happening between us and the partners, the subrecipients, and I think they are appreciating being actively involved in this way and making suggestions as far as how they move forward. I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes talking about the contracting process, because I know that it's felt like a long time. Believe me, working in it, it's felt like a long time too. But we were constantly working with the partners and the Treasury to make sure that the contracts were acceptable and worked for everybody. So we went through that process, we edited and amended the contract, and we sent it for review internally and externally. And that process actually, working with colleagues within the city as well as the external people, actually came up with a lot of really diligent processes about things that were picked up as we went through. Once the draft contract was agreed, the kickoff meeting was scheduled, and then after the kickoff meeting, all of the performance metrics, the compliance and the reporting was added into the contract. And then again, it had to go for review to everybody, internal and external, and the Treasury, to make sure that the final contracts were acceptable. And then at that point, the contracts were ready to be sent to partners for signature. But one of the challenges that we had before we actually managed to detail all the contracts and get them sent out was we needed three things from each of the subrecipients. We needed a certificate of insurance which included crime liability because of the sums of money that we were actually distributing. We had to make sure that we were covered and insured against any kind of crime that may take place with those sums of money. The subrecipients had to be registered on the system for awards management for federal funding. There could be no contracts or funds dispersed until they were registered on that process. And then also they had to be registered as a vendor for the city of Asheville. The first two of those documents have been the slowest part of this process. A lot of our subrecipients had to go and get additional crime liability insurance and getting logged on the SAM system. We had, for example, one of our clients, and in fact we allowed them to go forward. They only had a PO box as their registered address with the bank. The SAM system will not accept a PO box as an address. So they had to change the address with the bank. And once the bank had changed the address, they had to then send it to the Treasury to get registered on the SAM system. They told us about that. We spoke to the Treasury, and we were allowed to go forward and issue their contract before they had their SAMS number because they were in that process. But sometimes getting registered on the SAM system took 3, 4, 5 weeks for people to go through that process, and the same with certificates of insurance. So once the final contract was sent to the partners, it was reviewed and signed, and then came back through our system through Seamless Docs. I have to say at this point, I wanted to just thank Tom Downing for all the work that he did, because he was the one that actually generated all the contracts and did that process for us within the city. And also the other staff within the city as well, because as the process went through and it was reviewed, people were really diligent on reading all the information and making sure that we got it absolutely right. Once the fully executed contract was signed, then Munis, it was loaded onto Munis and the Treasury portal, and then we began dispersing funds. So we did, from February, start dispersing funds to some of our projects. But that process, with all the backwards and forwards, all the information that we needed to get from the partners before they could actually have a fully executed contract, took us from pretty much from September through February when we started. And currently, we're in a situation where there is 6 outstanding contracts, and I'll talk to you about those in just a second. So this is from our dashboard on the website. So this is the amount of funds that we got in the first place, the number of projects, the totals that we've awarded so far, and then the total spent. So we have actually dispersed close on $7 million at this point. So these are all the projects that are listed, and the ones that are in green are in progress, and you can see the funds that are spent. So the ones that we have, where we have dispersed some funds, and there is some currently going through on 3 or 4 of these projects to the tune of about $300,000 still that is just going through accounts payable at the moment. The ones that are in white on here that I have not are not fully executed at the minute. Eagle Market Street are still trying to get certificates of insurance. They are actually a fiscal agent for a health advocacy project that we're doing. As the fiscal agent, they have to have the crime liability. So we have been working with them at the minute and their insurance brokers to get their coverage for Eagle Market Street. We have the certificate of insurance for IFPA, which is the health advocacy. So we're still waiting for that, and at that point we're ready to go with that contract. Food Connection is currently going through Seamless Docs. So we have sent it out, they have signed it, and it is coming through. It's in Seamless Docs at the moment. Homeward Bound, we had a delay on their kickoff because I'm not sure if you're aware, they lost their executive director, and there was a new one coming from London, apparently, but who's not here yet. So their interim ED came to the kickoff meeting, which we had in January, and they're still trying to get their certificates of insurance and trying to get that all agreed at the moment. Step Up, we are due to have a kickoff meeting with them, but their schedule is they don't need to start until July. So we are trying to just arrange the kickoff so they can come in and then we can get that. The contract is already signed because Brian was previously working on this before he left, and so back in I think June time last year, I think we kind of negotiated the contract. So when we have the kickoff with them, we will go through that process and then issue a new contract to get them to sign it, and then it will go through to be fully executed. We Give a Share, or Equal Plates as it is now, they are going through Seamless Docs as we speak. And then YMI Cultural Centre, we were waiting for a certificate of insurance for them, but because they've had some change in their leadership at the moment, we are having a second kickoff meeting that's scheduled for the week after next with their interim leadership team and their director of operations, so that we can agree what the performance management is going to be like for their operational options. So for all of those that are not yet under contract, we are very close. We are just waiting for a few things to occur so that we can get them under contract. And again, just from the draft or the dashboard on the website, this is just kind of what it looks like. Again, a summary, and you can see where the funds are being allocated as far as the criteria that came from the Treasury. And then you have that same spreadsheet we've just been looking at on the last page is up on the website, so people can have a look at how what the funds are, what the awards are, and what funds have been spent.
How
confident do you feel that the pending contracts will actually be carried through? Or do we need to reconsider and reallocate?
I think at the moment, the only one that was under question was the YMI because of their change in circumstance and things like that. But we have met with Dogwood, Buncombe County, and YMI themselves, and we're confident that they have the right direction going forward and nothing is going to change. So that is the only one so far that there has been any question about. I think it's just been a case of getting certificates of insurance and things like that. But we're confident that we've put mitigation in place and had conversations, hard conversations with YMI about what happens going forward, and we are confident that we can still go ahead.
If there are additional funds that remain unallocated, because I was looking at that 5-month contracting period, you talked about September through February. 2 questions. What timeline are we up against in being able to pivot? And then to save time, is it possible to revisit high-ranked applications like the application to pilot staffing and services to address public safety issues at the transit center?
I think we know now what the timeline is. I think we've got much more experience, and so I think the timeline would be cut down to probably 2 or 3 months. And we have to expend the funds by December the 31st, 2026. So I think until the end of this year, we are probably comfortable. After that, I think we would probably need to look at how we were going to allocate them depending on other decisions that are made across the city. And then go through the process of deciding what that process is going to be. So, but I think at the moment, I don't think there's too drastic a restriction on the timeline. I think we're good. And they should, I think you've already voted on this, but just to give you the information, the Dogwood funds have gone through, and both ABCCM and Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity are under contract for both sets of funding, the ARPA funding. We, in essence, used the same contract, but we had 2 for each of them to cover the Dogwood funds. And we're working closely with Dogwood as well because they are willing to help with capacity and resources for all of the projects if there is a need. So they, obviously this is a matching or a grant that matched these 2 specifically because we applied for this, but they are involved in nearly all the meetings we have with Buncombe County as well because they are willing to, kind of offer some funds to help with capacity building and things within the organizations. Because we're asking them on reporting and things to give us some very specific information, and sometimes their resourcing doesn't run to that. So we are working a lot with Dogwood to try and assist us further with these projects. So again, I think the whole process for the evaluation, but also for now the metrics for the performance. And I've been working with Eric Jackson and Tom Downing in all of our kickoff meetings. And I know that Eric has published a few papers on the process that we've done for performance management and metrics, and one that just went out recently. And I think that we're very proud's probably not the right word, but I think we have been very creative in the way that we're doing the performance management and this partnership management. The projects are appreciating it. We have had a lot of positive feedbacks from everybody about this process. So I think it's a good process. I think it should be published because, as far as managing projects of this type, I think we are very innovative and have been very creative. And I think hopefully going forward now, whilst the projects are all up and running, you should see some more. And I'm hoping to get some of the projects themselves to come and speak to you about the process that they're going through and what they feel about it. And I think that's it.
I'd love to just underscore your last point about how innovative and creative and effective managing all this is. I mean, I struggle to collaborate managing the honey-do list at home with my husband. And this is a significant amount of resources with lots of partners in a way that the partners and we haven't done before. This amount of collaboration to get towards this outcome is phenomenal and so needed. Thanks.
Yeah, and we meet bi-weekly with Buncombe County, and Dogwood are now involved in that process. And then also with specific clients, we're also meeting with them bi-weekly. So I think the communication has really benefited everybody, and we're learning as we go. But I think it's been a learning experience for all of us, but I think especially for the projects that we're working with, because I think that they've got a voice, which they haven't had in a lot of situations with this kind of grant before.
I think this also really prepares us for all of the Inflation Reduction Act money that's coming through. There's so much more federal resources that continue to be opened up under the Biden administration, and it takes work to be prepared to receive money like that. And so I think we've built a really important muscle.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point to note, is that, you know, we've had to, this is so unprecedented that we've had to kind of develop things as we've gone along. And I think, you know, and then learning to work with the Treasury as they've been learning to manage these kinds of funds as well has been horrendous at times, but also, you know, it's been an exercise in patience for sure. But I think, you know, we have done a lot to research and mitigate and things like that. And I would again say for Eric Jackson and Tom Downing, who have, you know, other things to do in their day job, they've been an invaluable support, as has everybody else in the city of Asheville. I think we've tried to prioritize this as much as possible and push it forward.
And although Kim is giving kudos to lots of other staff members, she really is a staff of one doing the yeoman's work. So appreciate you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
No, but it's nice to see you again. Thank you.
Likewise.
We're balancing how many times we've seen you virtually versus in person. We're almost even. Okay, that concludes the manager's report for this evening. People who need to make their getaway, this is a good time for you to try to do that. Before we move to our only public hearing, which is a public hearing to consider submission to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Home ARP Allocation Plan, and Nikki Reed is here to speak on this item.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Nikki Reed. I am the Director of the Community and Economic Development Department for the city. So Home ARP funding is the subject of our public hearing tonight. This is a special one-time allocation of federal home funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So in our community, home funding is unique in our area because we have a regional collaborative of local governments that come together in order to qualify to receive these federal funds. And so in our area, those counties are Buncombe, Henderson, Transylvania, and Madison. And then there are several member municipalities from those counties that also form what's called the Asheville Regional Housing Consortium. And so the city of Asheville is the lead entity on behalf of the consortium. And so formal actions are really routed through this governing body. So as far as Home ARP, as set forth by HUD, there is a specific framework for the expenditure of these funds. The first step in that process is the development of an allocation plan. To do this, the city has engaged a consultant, Baker Tilly, to develop the allocation plan in compliance with those HUD requirements. So at this point, I would like to introduce Ely Mathis with Baker Tilly to walk us through that process and the final results in order to frame up the public hearing tonight. Ely is also joined by Baron Bell, who's with community development experts who performed the majority of the data analysis that went into the plan. So with that, I will welcome Ely to the podium. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us here to present on the work that we've been doing. Again, my name is Ely Mathis. I'm a manager with Baker Tilly's Housing and Economic Development team. And we've been working on housing and economic development grants across the country and have been doing quite a bit of home ARP allocation plan work in the past several months. And I was really excited to see the Asheville opportunity come around. I'm a former Asheville resident and city employee, so it's great to be back and working with you all. And I'm also joined by Baron Bell, who's a sub-consultant on this project with Baker Tilly, who has just an enormous amount of experience, over 25 years, I think, working with HUD and housing programs, so he brought a wealth of expertise to the project. So we want to spend a little bit of time tonight taking you through the Home ARP program. And it's actually, I don't know if someone planned it, but it actually turned out great to have the ARP update prior to this. So I don't know if that was Maggie planning the agenda out.
Incredible coordination.
So we'll spend a couple of minutes just walking through the Home ARP program and explaining some of the guidelines there and the restrictions. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about the data collection and community engagement process that we went through. And then finally, we'll take a look at some of the recommendations in the plan for this $4.7 million of Home ARP funding. So I think most of you are familiar with the HOME program, which provides grants to state and local governments to create affordable housing for low-income households. In addition to the normal home allocation, the American Rescue Plan allocated an additional $5 billion of funding through the HOME program for housing, rental assistance, supportive services, and non-congregate shelter. And any participating jurisdiction or PJ that qualifies for annual home funding is eligible to receive this Home ARP allocation. And the Asheville region is receiving just under $4.7 million in Home ARP funding. And the allocation plan that we've been working on is a requirement from HUD. HUD needs to review and approve that plan prior to allocating the funding to the region. So a couple of key takeaways before we get started, or key findings that we found during the process. And you'll probably hear me mention these things a few times because we really want to drive these points home. But the first item is that, again, this is about $4.7 million. And I think it is really important to understand that it is a one-time allocation. So this is not like the annual recurring home funding. It's also targeted specifically at homeless individuals or families, as well as populations that are at risk of homelessness, so very low-income populations. And the allocation plan has to be data-driven and based on public engagement and consultation with service providers. So I think that's an important point too. I certainly don't want anyone to get the impression that this is Baker Tilly's plan or even the city of Asheville's plan. This really was a regional plan based off of the data we collected, previous planning efforts, public engagement, and consultations with really the experts in the field working with these qualifying populations. Based on all the data and information that we've collected, really some key themes have come across, and there's just an enormous need for affordable rental housing units in the region, as well as additional supportive services for things like case management, and mental health, and substance abuse. And I know that's, I'm sure that's no surprise to the people sitting here tonight. So we'll take you through some of this information, what we heard through public engagement, and also some of the data that we analyzed to come to these conclusions. So to begin with, these are the eligible populations for the Home ARP program. So again, we're really focusing on individuals that are families that are experiencing homelessness or individuals that are at risk of homelessness. And we can go into a little bit more detail in a minute about eligible populations and specific qualifying characteristics. There's also on the right-hand side of the screen here is the four kind of main buckets of eligible activities for Home ARP funding. So production or preservation of affordable rental housing, tenant-based rental assistance, supportive services, which really covers a pretty broad range of areas of services, and then purchase and development of non-congregate shelter. And I did want to just clarify with that, it really is focusing on purchase and development, so operating expenses for shelters is excluded under the grant. And also want to clarify that within the allocation plan, we include an allocation table for the funding breakdown between these different activities. We don't have to specify in the plan at this point detail beyond how the funding would be broken down for these. So in the example of supportive services, we don't need to identify at this point the types of supportive services that are included, just what percentage of the overall funding that category would receive. I'm going to let Baron step in for a second.
All right, thank you, Ely. So on this particular slide here, we give just a bit of definition about the qualifying populations under the Home ARP dollars. Under general home funds, the idea is to make rents available to households at certain income levels With the home ARP allocation, we have the qualifying population. So homeless are people who are living in a situation or a location that's not fit for human habitation or living in a shelter. This slide right here gives you a definition of at risk of homelessness. So the first thing to understand about at risk of homelessness, these are households whose incomes are at 30% and below the area median income. So in our chart, you see here, for Metro Asheville, the median income for a single person is $56,000 annual. Adjust that for a one-person household, $16,900 is 30% of a median income for the Asheville area. So persons that are extremely low income, or at 30%, are considered extremely low income under the HUD guidelines. So what we've done here, we give an example from a one-person household, extremely low income is $16,900, to a four-person household, extremely low income is $24,100. So all of those are 30% of median adjusted for different family sizes. So once they have that income of 30% and below median, or they're extremely low income, then they have, if they have one of these other housing situations, then they're at risk of homelessness, which is basically they have insufficient resources to immediately get housing, should they need housing, and then they have several characteristics, move frequently because of economic reason, lived in the home of another because of economic hardship, lives in a hotel motel, or lives in severely overcrowded housing, which is a situation where the rooms in a home, you have 1.5 persons in a room. That's severely overcrowded.
And so this is a list of the supportive services category, and I won't really go into a lot of detail here, but we did want to show this slide just to make everyone aware that it is, it really does cover a broad range of services, all the way from, case management and mental health services to legal services and life skills training. And again, we won't, within the plan, we won't go into the level of detail of which of these services will be funding, but we do want to be clear that it is a broad category and covers, a lot of the different qualifying populations that Barron just talked about. So home ARP allocation plans, again, this is required for the participating jurisdiction to receive the home ARP funding. And at a minimum, the plan needs to describe the proposed home ARP activities and how the funding will be distributed between these different eligible activity categories. And again, HUD is going to be ultimately the one reviewing and approving this plan. So everything we've been doing is based on HUD guidelines for how these plans need to be completed. And the deadline for submitting it is March 31st. So we do want to call attention to that, just to point out that it is a really advanced timeline. That's an announcement that HUD made, I think, just before the holidays. So it did kind of catch communities across the country off guard that it is just a rapidly approaching deadline. But we are in shape to get the plan submitted by then. And these are the key components the allocation plan has to include, and will be, as we go through the presentation, we'll touch on each of these. But the first two components, the consultation process and public participation. Consultation is really focused specifically on stakeholder agencies and organizations that work specifically with the qualifying populations. So we did a significant amount of outreach with these groups through a series of meetings and surveys that I'll show you in just a minute. The public participation process is much broader and includes any member of the public, and that's actually still kind of ongoing at this point. We have some survey data that we'll show you that was done earlier in the process, but we're actually still in the public comment period at this point and still taking feedback from the public. We'll also walk you through the needs assessment and gap analysis that was completed to show the level of need within the community. And then finally, we'll be looking at home ARP activities and production housing goals, which will determine an estimate of the number of new affordable housing units that would be created using these funds. And the preferences and the refinancing guidelines, these two items at the end, these are both optional under HUD's rules, and neither of them are actually going to be included in the plan for this region. Preferences, again, it's an optional activity that can be included. Communities can identify specific populations and give them priority for certain funding. And with refinancing guidelines, there is an option to refinance existing debt with a home ARP funding. And again, we decided not to address either one of those in the plan. So to start the consultation process, we held a series of virtual focus group meetings with stakeholder organizations. And because of the regional nature of the consortium, we actually structured this a little bit different than we have with other communities previously. We scheduled 4 different meetings, so 1 meeting for each county within the consortium so that we could focus on specific needs within those geographies. And a total of 51 agencies were invited to participate in the focus group meetings. And ultimately, we had 42 individuals representing 30 different agencies that participated in at least one focus group. We also had some additional phone calls and direct conversations with some of these groups that weren't able to attend meetings or wanted to have some additional feedback after the meetings. So really strong participation across the board. And really 3 different areas were identified as kind of the higher priorities for using the home ARP funding. And the one that really came to the top was production and preservation of affordable rental housing. I would say really kind of across the board, we heard that that was the highest priority. Again, I'm sure not a huge surprise to most people here tonight. Non-congregate shelter was also something that was definitely discussed quite a bit, and supportive services was a major priority. And I guess one thing to note here too, when we were structuring this to have a meeting in each county, I actually expected there to be a pretty significant difference in what we heard between the different counties, especially with the more rural areas. And I was actually surprised. We had pretty consistent feedback from all groups. I didn't hear a huge disparity between what the priorities were. You know, really across the board, affordable rental housing units was the priority. In addition to the stakeholder meetings, we also had a stakeholder survey that was really meant to augment what we heard in the meetings and provide additional feedback opportunity for people who were able to attend. And if someone was not able to attend the meetings, they could complete the survey. And we had 34 responses to that survey, again, focused just on stakeholders and service providers. And the entire survey is included as an attachment to the allocation plan, so you can go take a look at that in more detail. But I pulled a couple of questions out here that really get to the root of what we're trying to define within the allocation plan. So this first question we're asking about, what is the highest priority issue related to homelessness in the region? And 91% identified lack of affordable rental housing as the highest priority issue. Also 6% for financial assistance or tenant-based rental assistance, and then 3% identified lack of shelter units. So that was significant. When we've done this in the past, I don't think we've seen that a significant number of people identifying one issue like that. We really, kind of see a broad list of activities there that are listed as priorities. So that was significant. And then with the next question, we're really trying to hone in specifically on the use of the home ARP funding. So we ask about, given that these are the priority issues, how should this funding be used to address these issues? And again, 79% identified development of affordable housing as the top priority. Still definitely some interest in non-congregate shelter and rental assistance, as well as some for nonprofit operating assistance. But by and large, most people were identifying development of more affordable housing as the top priority. So the public participation process, again, this is still ongoing, but the first step in this process was a public survey that was made available in both English and Spanish, and we received a total of 302 responses to that survey, which is pretty significant. It's a really good response rate based on the other communities that we've worked with recently. I pulled a couple of different questions from here that I think highlight the priorities that are coming across from that survey. And again, the entire survey is attached to the allocation plan if you'd like to look at it. But when asked to rank community housing needs, construction of new affordable housing was ranked as the most important. And there's a screenshot there of the survey. What we've done is, with most of these questions, we allow people to do ranked choice so they can identify 1 through 4 based on their priorities. But as you see, the first item there, construction of new affordable housing units has over 40%. So it's kind of the strong favorite of the priorities. But again, still interest in shelters, supportive services, and housing vouchers or tenant-based rental assistance. Diving in a little bit more specifically about the housing needs, we ask some additional questions about the type of housing that's needed. So 56% identified affordable rental housing units as the greatest housing need in the community, followed by 31% that identified transitional housing with supportive services, and then 13% that identified non-congregate shelter.
How do you reconcile this with the 3% response around more shelter needed? Does this fall under, does that make any sense?
Well, so this is the public survey. So I think
Okay,
the one you're
okay.
referencing was actually the
The
stakeholder
smaller,
survey.
okay, this is
Yeah.
the larger, I'm sorry.
And so again, this was made available to the entire public. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to sort of take that with a grain of salt.
Got it.
The stakeholder survey is really kind of the experts in the industry. And then we also asked some questions about gaps in services. And again, even though we don't need to define within the plan specific types of services that'll be funded, we still wanted to take this opportunity to get more information about specific services that are needed. And this really was pretty telling. Mental health services and substance abuse treatment really were the biggest priorities here. Mental health services you see there in red, and then most of the individuals that identified substance abuse treatment. And there were also a lot of comments that many people kind of considered the two linked, that when they were selecting mental health services, they were talking about substance abuse. So we were really kind of looking at those going hand in hand in a lot of cases. But that was telling. There's definitely a huge need for services across the board, but mental health and substance abuse specifically. All right, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Okay, thanks again, Ely. All right, so this part of the presentation, we're going to try to not overwhelm everyone. It's overwhelming calculating this data. So what we've done here, we have charts that we incorporate into the allocation plan, so you can get a feel for everyone can get an understanding how the data actually plays a role into the impact. And we see if our stakeholders and citizens have the same ideas, based upon some real concrete numbers. So this particular chart here, we deal with the first part of the qualifying population, or number one qualifying population, persons who are homeless. So the information here comes from the point in time survey for the Asheville region. So this data includes Asheville, Buncombe, Transylvania, Madison, and Henderson County. So these are special calculations just for this ARP plan. To the left of this, you see the current inventory. These are the number of beds that were available for certain population groups on January 1st. So the takeaways from this particular chart here on the current inventory, for emergency shelter, we have 33 units and 67 beds were available. Adult-only beds, 233. For transitional housing is a housing situation that's only for a 24-month period. We had 59 beds and 21 units available for families, and we had 218 adult-only beds. We have permanent supportive housing, where we had 118 beds and 37 units. For adults only, we had 536 permanent supportive housing beds that were available on the night of the point in time survey. And then we have other permanent housing, which is permanent housing, is subsidized housing, but the persons living there do not require certain supportive services in order to continue their residence. So the thing to understand from this is the number of veterans that have transitional housing beds, or number of beds that are available for veterans for transitional housing and permanent supportive housing. You see those numbers there, 174 and 382. So of the beds that are available in the region, veterans have the majority of beds for transitional housing and also permanent housing. Now, in the middle of the chart, we have the homeless population. And this is on January again, where persons go out and try to enumerate and find people who are homeless, taking into consideration people who are outside, living in a car, living in a park, and also people who are already residing within a shelter. So what we have here, and these data, I don't like to say good because all of this is really unfortunate, but for families, we had 34 families on the point in time survey that were sheltered. 9 unsheltered homeless families were enumerated. As compared to adults, we had 412 adults only that were residing in a shelter, and we had 291 unsheltered adults during the point in time survey.
Can I ask you a question on the number, the family, is that the total number of persons?
No, that's the total number of households or
Oh, so
families.
we don't,
That's
so the total number of
persons.
persons is unknown, it could be.
The total number of persons is not on this chart because
Yeah,
for families,
okay.
you're trying to provide housing units.
So
and
it could
that's
be
what we're trying
one
to get at.
adult, one child would be one.
One adult, one child would be a family, yes.
Yeah,
And in
okay.
the narrative of the ARP allocation plan, we have those numbers in greater
Okay,
detail.
thank you.
Thanks for that question.
And as somebody who participated in the point in time count, I know the public is very concerned and watching this with us and looking for meaningful action. We know that this number is an undercount because it's really hard to get this number. So this is as close a picture as we could achieve in a very short window a year ago.
That is correct. So the point in time count, and that's why I emphasize it's a count that's done one night in January. In different places of the country, you might get more a count, but in east and northern areas, you don't get that much of a count. So this data should not be seen as the year-round homelessness impact. It's just a point in time count to try to get an idea on any given night, what was the impact of homelessness in a region.
Thank you. And yet still we see there's a gap. I just wanted to make sure that folks that are following along know that we do know that this is an undercount. It is a picture of a period of time.
Yes, and consistent with that, we have victims of domestic violence. During the point in time survey, we had 60 households and families that were sheltered and 41 that were unsheltered. But again, that's just the point in time, those who were enumerated. We had, in our narrative that has been updated, there was some discrepancy in the state data source where we had 8 persons during the year from July to June that reported 8 referrals, but that number was incorrect. It was 481 referrals for domestic violence. We don't know from that data source if those persons were served or not served, but so this point in time data should in no way be seen as an annual total count. So the idea is to have units available for persons during a given night, but not for the entire year, the data that you see on this chart for homeless. So over to the left, we have the gap analysis. Now, the gap analysis is not necessarily a calculation, a mathematical calculation about the numbers you see here. It's some of the numbers, but it's a lot of consultation and other reports that exist locally. So some of the other data that we had available, the other studies, we had a 5-year strategic plan for CDBG and home. We had the National Alliance in Homelessness within Reach report. And based upon those data sources, we estimated a gap of 60 additional beds or 15 units for families and 285 adult beds. So for homelessness, the takeaway is that the adults have a greater homelessness need within the area based upon this data than do families, okay? Now, this next chart deals with additional data for the ARP. So the ARP, again, going back to the qualifying populations, is just not to resolve homelessness, but the funds are also available for persons who are at risk of homelessness. And then we have also persons who are at greatest risk of housing instability. So when we talk about persons who are at greater risk at housing instability, we're talking about affordable rental units, the need for affordable rental units when we deal with that population group. So this table here has actual data that doesn't come from surveys per se, but this is HUD data, special tabulations provided by the Census Bureau. They do it for HUD each year based upon the American Community Survey data. These are 5-year estimates. So the total number of rental units, according to the ACS, we had 63,000 rental units. And of those rental units, according to the special tabulated data, 3,528 of those units were available to households that are extremely low income, that's 30% and below median. And we had 11,445 units available for folks that are 50% and below, or 50% to 31 of the median area income. So you see further on the chart, at 0 to 30 of AMI, there were approximately 9,463 households with extremely low income that had a severe housing problem, which is lacking indoor plumbing, kitchen facilities, 1.5 more persons per room, and also paying rents that are 50% of their monthly income. So again, at extremely low income, we had 9,463, and the data showed for the population group at 30 to 50%, 7,028. So by this, we came up with a gap of 6,115 households, because this data did show, presumably if it's accurate, that there were enough rental units available to households at 50% of median to deal with those who are severely cost burdened. Now, also within the narrative, we have some other data, just to give you some numbers here. So from 2015 to 2019, it was 20,945 persons who were extremely low income in the region. And of these people, of these households, 14,025 had a housing problem, 10,115 were paying more than 50% of their incomes for rent. Those at 50% at median income, those who had greatest risk of housing instability, we had 22,775 households that were at greatest risk of housing instability, 11,000 of those being owners, 10,965 renters, and of these, 12,740 had some form of a housing problem. So the numbers do show that the persons who may not be at risk of homelessness or may not be homeless, but who are at greatest risk of housing instability because of the market here. So in our data analysis, Asheville has the highest fair market rents, or the highest rents in any region in the state of North Carolina. So when you have those very high rents, it's kind of like a bottleneck effect that impacts, on down to the lower income levels. So that's what this data shows, is that there are a lot of individuals who could afford housing if units were available. It's a great, great need. It's a great, great need for everything, but in terms of the quantity, in terms of the numbers, there are a lot of persons who are at greatest risk of housing instability that could afford rents if there were more rental units available.
All right. And I'm told we may need to move along, so I'm going to try to speed up some. But
Baseball people are used to really long games. I'm just kidding.
Well, I'll give you just a second to let this sink in. So this is the allocation table, which again breaks down the funding, the about $4.7 million between the different eligible activities. And I'm going to give you just a second to take a look at it while I drink some water. So I think Barron made an important point that I want to say as we're walking through these. I'll kind of take you through each of these line by line. But across the board, we know there is just a huge amount of need in all of these areas. And that's one of the things that make these projects extremely difficult. There's also kind of a risk of trying to fund everything and then not having enough funding in one particular area to make a significant impact. And also the consideration that it is, one-time allocation, not an annual funding source. So all of these factors went into determining which eligible activities to fund with the program. So I'll kind of start with the largest item here. We identified 66% of the funding to go towards the development of affordable rental housing. So that's about $3.1 million. With the balance of program dollars going towards supportive services. So that's $1 million at 21% of the total budget. And then there's the 13% that covers the administrative and planning cost of administering the program for several years. As we talked about before, non-congregate shelter and tenant-based rental assistance were both topics that we discussed at length in all of our meetings. And there's definitely some interest in trying to put funding towards both of those activities. But really what we heard across the board was there's a bottleneck or logjam with the housing continuum in the region. So you're in a situation where with tenant-based rental assistance, for instance, with your existing vouchers, over 50% of them are expiring before people are able to use them and find a house that's willing to accept them. So there's just this huge need for affordable units so that we can maximize the use of existing voucher programs. With non-congregate shelter, there's some concern about the high cost per unit of shelters and not being able to allocate operating funding for those. So again, with it being a one-time allocation and no operating dollars, there was some concerns about that. And the thinking is that development of affordable rental units combined with supportive services is going to help relieve some of the pressure with non-congregate shelters and tenant-based rental assistance. If we're putting more units in the marketplace, we can better utilize voucher programs to help move people out of shelters in public housing and into permanent housing and help free up space in those facilities. And again, this, this isn't Baker Tilly's recommendation or staff's recommendation. This is what we've developed based on reviewing the data, the consultations that we had, the public feedback, really kind of all the information we've been gathering for the last several months has pointed in this direction. And I want to point out just a couple other things before we shift into questions, but this plan, we presented this to the Housing Consortium on March 6th, and there were a couple of recommendations for some pretty minor modifications to the funding chart I just showed, which really just resulted in shifting additional funding towards production or preservation of affordable housing. So these changes are all reflected in the current draft, and that was officially endorsed by the Housing Consortium on March 6th. And then a couple of important dates going forward. So again, we've presented and received the endorsement of the ARHC on March 6th, which kicked off our public comment period, and that will continue to run through March 20th. So we are still accepting public comment and reviewing everything that we receive. Tonight is actually the public hearing, so we're not asking council to approve the plan tonight. We're really here to hear from the public, give them a forum to provide feedback to us, and then we would be returning with the final plan on March 28th so that we can get final approval to submit to HUD by March 31st. Okay, I think we had a couple more slides, but I'm going to stop there just to make sure we don't run too far over time.
Okay. Any questions before we open the public hearing?
Yeah, I guess my main curiosity is, like, when I zoom in and I see the intention is like a holistic approach with this pool of funds, and also the need for regional partnerships to have a big impact. I'm also thinking about zooming out in the opioid settlement funds. So I did a little bit of digging to figure out, we've got Buncombe County, Madison, Transylvania, and Henderson, is that right, for this regional consortium, which we all received opioid funds. And so I'm wondering, was that part of the consideration in your scope of work for the overlap of where, or lack of overlap? Like, for example, if we focused on tenant rental-based assistance and development of affordable housing and not the supportive services side because there might be overlap with the opioid settlement, or was that not on the table for your scope of work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we did look, I don't know that we were specifically honing in on that funding source, but we were looking holistically across the board at what services are currently available. With the tenant-based rental assistance, there was definitely interest in doing that. But again, there was a lot of concern about putting any funding towards that without being able to utilize the current vouchers.
Right.
I think one thing about the affordable housing funding, I think there were $2 million of home funds available last year and over $8 million of projects that applied for it. So there's a huge demand, excuse me, a huge demand for that, and there's projects that are kind of primed and ready to go. So the thinking is we can put the money towards that, get units on the street as quick as possible, and there's, I guess, just that hesitation of putting money into that voucher program when there's already difficulty utilizing what's there.
And is there any conversation, I know Sage, you're the liaison, with the regional consortium around partnering with the county, or how we get closer to that 30% AMI? Because I think we've struggled to get partnership for development at that low area median income.
Has the consortium talked about partnership with the county to achieve lower AMIs? No, not specifically. I mean, this particular approach and how Baker Tilly approached it was to really seek input from those communities about what they needed specifically. And I don't think we ever really sat down and said, now that we all know we need more low income, who are we going to look to? But I mean, it's a conversation we could have. This has been pretty, I don't know, studied data, results, next steps kind of methodology so far.
Thank you.
The plan does allow 30% of the units to be rented out for persons or households with incomes at 80% of the median. Because of those lower income levels, it's hard to get the revenue to pay for the debt service. So that's one thing we didn't have in our official presentation, but 30% of the units can be rented out at 80%.
Okay, thank you.
And then vouchers, you know,
That always makes it confusing.
it does, and just because I know we tend to throw out AMI and percentages a lot for everyone listening, like, when you hear us reviewing affordable housing projects and targeting 80 AMI, and then also saying we want half of these units to accept vouchers, that's what we're talking about here. The gap in available units that accept housing vouchers, which essentially, you may not have a housing voucher, I guess, up to 50% AMI a housing voucher will cover. So if you are a 30 AMI resident, you are hopefully with a voucher in hand, but we do not have enough units for as many vouchers are issued in the community, so we're seeing a lot go back unused. So that's really what we're speaking to here. But another initiative, I mean, the county talks a lot about their goals of partnering on tax credit projects, which are always 60% AMI or lower. So in a sense, they're already, Buncombe County Commission is already targeting.
I thought of one other question. It may not be, once again, the scope of work, but is there any limitation to using this funding to cascade projects that are already like shovel-ready or on the ground so that we can get a longer timeline?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's any limitation. And what came out of this is, I mean, I chair this commission, so every year we do about 2.5 million, 1.2 million in funds to align with tax credit projects, and another million or so for services and programs. And this, to me, I mean, we never have enough. Every year when we sit down, it's never enough. To Ely's point, it was 8 million in asks last time. So it sparks true to me that this is just more of the same. We got some additional money. It's not really going to do anything extreme. It's going to do more of the same, which is already the identified need.
One thing you need to be careful of, if you already have some projects on the ground, it might trigger environmental review assessments, and then also might trigger a relocation if persons are going to be temporarily displaced. Those things have to be considered.
Thank you.
Any other? Okay, we are going to open the public hearing on this item, and we have one person signed up to speak. First, let me just remind speakers for this evening that you will have 3 minutes to speak. Watch the lights on the lectern. Green means go, orange means they're almost done, and red and the buzzer means stop. And the first person signed up to speak is Cheryl Sermons.
Thank God God's with me. I was going to be nervous.
Will you pull that microphone so it's sort of,
Oh, sure.
there you go. Yeah.
Can everybody hear me? I guess what my problem is I moved to Asheville, and I know I have 3 minutes, in 2020. I had plenty of money. I'm disabled, financially exploited, domestic violence. I live in an apartment because I'm on Social Security disability that is $1,600. I make $1,500. I don't know where to go for vouchers. I was dealing with Philip Hardin, the 18 months. I'm 58 years old. I lived in Florida. I had a house, a car, a good job. So this is demeaning to me. All I want, I realize it's 18 months. They're going to evict me. They just said they're going to start the process today or tomorrow. I want to be able to go to school so I can better myself. I don't know how to get funding for that. I don't know how to get vouchers so I can see if my apartment complex will take it, or if I can find a private owner of a home or a townhome, so I can live without fear. I mean, this is again, and then someone has remotely accessed my internet. I know who it is. I had a 50B against that person. I've had people come to my house to look at it all, and I said I need a cyber forensic person because they have never seen this type of infiltration. So I went 6 months without a phone, without internet. I got into a car accident in July. I have no family here. I couldn't even get to the hospital. And no one cares. And it's in your General Assembly. I told Philip Hardin, Stony Bevins, I'm sorry. Oh, well, that doesn't do me any good. And I know it's blinking, but who will help me? I said to Philip Hardin, I said, so I'm close to the time. Are you going to give me money for a tent? I don't even have a car to live in because he won't sign the deed, the title, so I can get an insurance settlement. This is from July. I'm 58 years old. I walked to the store. So all these reports are awesome. And I've read, I do a lot of research, but it's reports, financial exploitation. Nobody does anything. Show me the end result of these reports. And who's going to help me fill up in all the... It's 18 months, Cheryl. Too bad for you. Find something else. I would find something else. How am I going to get there? Does anybody have any answers?
So let me just say one thing about public comment. We just take public comment. We don't do a back and forth.
So it's just reports.
So I'm sorry about that. But if you would please follow up with us and email us, we might be able to
I did
refer you
that.
to some resources.
In June 2021, after my domestic violence, I realized I'm done, but let me
Thank
just
you.
finish, please. And I was
If you
living
will
in my-
email,
yeah, if-
we have to cut you off because time.
Because
but
we've got.
If
we've
you
gotta
will
move on.
email us again, I'll respond to you with some places to start.
Tell me your name again.
Cheryl Sermons, and
It's here. It's
you
here.
guys said that you couldn't help me. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, that is the only person signed up to speak under this item, so I'm going to close the public hearing. I do need a motion there.
I'm ready.
You ready? Somebody's ready? Okay, you're ready.
I do want to share before I make this motion, I am very much reminded right now, the housing crisis in our community is vast. And if you are housed, you are lucky. And many, many, many of us are one incident, one car accident, one health scare, one minor disaster away from what we just heard. And I appreciate that input that she shared. Knowing that, I'm going to make a motion to acknowledge that the requisite public hearing concerning the home ARP allocation plan for submission of an amendment to the fiscal year 21-22 annual action plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has been held this day, and to set the final vote for approval of the plan by City Council on March 28th, 2023.
All right, we have a
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments before we vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. We do have some people in the overflow room, and I think we've got some seats available up here. Hold on, let's see what happens here. We might even have like almost a whole row. 1, 2, 3, 4. I see like about 7 seats or so. So if you're in the overflow room, maybe you'll count off and come on up here. Okay, I was off. Maggie's correcting me. There's 8. Okay.
What inning are we in?
Okay, we're getting ready for the big event now here, and this is under new business, and it is a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a funding letter of commitment addressed to Major League Baseball regarding the city's intent to bring McCormick Field into compliance with new player development league facility standards, but it's also so much more, and we're going to hear about that from Chris Corral. And folks, we weren't positive we were going to be able to vote on this tonight, but we are going to. So thank you for all those folks that are here attending, and for those in the overflow room and the gazillions of people watching on TV. Don't be nervous, Chris. It's all right.
Wait my chance. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. I'm Chris Corral, Director of Community and Regional Entertainment Facilities for the city. Here to talk about McCormick today. So I'll start with key takeaways. I know we just went through this in the budget work session, so I'll try to go a little quicker. McCormick Field, it's a regional asset currently owned by the city. Over the years, it hasn't been adequately invested in. The facility has been leased out and principally used by the minor league baseball team there, which is the Asheville Tourists, as you know. The facility should, in our opinion, and can be used for many other purposes to derive a broader community benefit. And a funding plan would require team investment, county investment, city investment, TDA investment, and possibly, if we're lucky, the state. In order to retain Major League Baseball affiliation in Asheville, though, a significant renovation is required, and we would need a commitment for that renovation by April 1st of 2023, later this month. So the asset opened in 1924. It was last renovated in 1992. It seats about 4,000 people, 8.25 acres on the total property, and it replaced a stadium down on Choctaw Street. Just a brief history. In 2022, Major League Baseball issued a new facility standards document and a rubric scoring system that applies beginning on April 1st this year. It's kind of like a health score, but in reverse. You want to have low numbers, not high numbers. The goal is to be below 30 points by April 1st of this year. We're currently at 177, so we know we are not going to meet that, hence the need for a funding and renovation plan to Major League Baseball. In 2022, the team and the city, we started our negotiations on what a lease structure would look like based on a facility renovation. And last month on the 14th of February, we had a council work session with a deep dive, reviewed options, and took some recommended direction. So the project as a whole is about $37.5 million. Adjustments to current home clubhouse, converting to a visitors clubhouse, tearing down the visitors clubhouse, rebuilding a home clubhouse with new batting tunnels, weight room, commissary, and female facilities, new scoreboard and video display assets and structures for them, suites and expanded press box to meet player development standards, new LED sport lighting, redoing the field drainage and the crown that's currently on the field, updates to the third and first baseline, including picnic areas, wall padding, and new entrance, access, and entry plaza to the gates, and a nice big line item in there for deferred maintenance upkeep on MPEs. So on February 14th at the work session, we heard clearly from this body to do a little more community engagement, a request for further information related to non-baseball event revenue potential, and to further explore the financial model, seeking additional inputs, and to try to limit the impact on the currently budgeted CIP projects. So step one, community engagement. We met with East End and Oakhurst neighborhoods, which are on either side of the stadium. They had three real main points to really dig deep into. First and foremost, parking and traffic. So there was a request for more and better traffic management, not just for Asheville tourist games, but for all other events held at that stadium or at Memorial Stadium right up the hill. We heard clearly that, at least on the Oakhurst side, they feel like the team does a really good job on parking and traffic, and that baseball games are actually not a problem. It's Memorial Stadium events and trying to find a way to work together better there. On the East End side, which is the north end of the stadium, there's not really a lot of traffic and parking management, and they've had an ask to expand that management to the north side of the stadium as well. Additionally, a request for the city to bring up enforcement, parking tickets, et cetera, to really try to enforce the current laws. It's not an area that our parking department currently enforces. Noise was the next one, so a request to not allow additional nights of fireworks, and a request to ensure that fireworks are shot earlier than previously shot, and to reduce the other loud events, to try to keep that number between 10 and 15, and to make sure that those other loud events, i.e. concerts, abide by the noise ordinance. Another ask to create better communication and notification. So the team runs a text program that's opt-in for fireworks that texts you, I believe, the morning of the event to say, hey, fireworks are being shot tonight, and then gives you a 5-minute warning before the first one explodes in the air. So they want to expand that the best we can to include all other programming, so anything else that's at the baseball stadium or up at Memorial. So it would be on the city to help create a one-stop shop of a programming calendar that includes Parks and Rec, any non-baseball events and baseball events that are in that complex of stadiums. And with that one-stop shop, The team would then use their opt-in text notification to send out, for example, like every Monday, these are the events coming this week, and find more information at this link, so the neighborhoods could always know what's coming up and be prepared. So with that feedback, we made some slight adjustments to the deal points with the tourists. Parking and traffic, the club has agreed to manage all McCormick events, baseball and non-baseball, and we're in talks about them operating the parking and traffic for events at Memorial Stadium. An additional support from the city for enforcement, we don't know what that looks like yet, but we know that's something we're open to, and we can try to find a way to help with that portion of the project. Noise and fireworks, the team has revoked the request for additional fireworks nights and amended their requests for the ability to shoot on back-to-back nights to apply only on July 4th and only when July 4th falls on a Saturday, which is 3 times in the next 20 years, in 2026, 2037, and 2043. And just a little note, last year was the first year with a pitch clock and earlier start times. The team moved their game times up to 6:30, so the average firework shot was at 9:26 p.m. compared to close to 11 p.m. just a few seasons ago. And the text to email notification process that I mentioned earlier, the teams agreed to expand that. Any questions on the community input side before I move on?
I don't really have a question, but I would like to convey a great deal of thanks from both neighborhoods. They felt that the engagement you provided was greater than as usual. And same holds true for the baseball club. They consider the tourists a neighbor and one they can get to consensus with very easily. So I want to thank you on their behalf as well.
Thank you.
As
Thanks to the
the
team.
baseball.
The teams, they've been in communication with the neighborhood for years and years, and so that has really helped. All right. So current and future facility usage. Who attends tourist games currently? So this statistic is just for baseball games. It's from their most recent economic impact report, showing that residents of Buncombe County that are not city residents make up about 29% of their ticket buyers. Asheville city residents about 23%, and you'll see surrounding counties make up a good portion too, and then not from North Carolina about 16. So showing it really is a locals first type of stadium. Tourists attend the tourist slightly less often than the locals. It's really hard to say. All right. Funding plan. So our current estimated funding structure brings the team in at $468,000 plus on average for 20 years. The county at $250,000 per year for 20 years. The TDA hopefully reallocating a $1.95 million grant that we previously received for Cox Avenue, and approving a debt service grant request that we would put in for $1.4 million per year for 15 years, leaving the city to cover the gap. And in our worst case scenario of gap, which we'll get into a little more deeply shortly, $875,000 per year for 20 years. All of these estimates are best case scenarios. None of these have been committed to other than the team at this point. So a scenario breakdown. We have the ability to add in a facility fee on tickets sold at the stadium. For example, like 50 cents on every general admission ticket sold. That could come 100% to the city that we could use to offset this debt. So we're recommending that facility fee be put in place if no state funding is put in, comes to the table. So with no change from the partners and a facility fee instituted, our annual payment would be about $875,000 per year. And then depending on what other inputs come in, that payment could go down to as low as $380,000, like we discussed earlier in the budget work session. So $2 million fund balance being a big one of upfront cash, thinking of it as a down payment on your mortgage, for example. There's a state funding opportunity that may come through the state budget based on the parameters that we are aware of that would exist if this goes through. The maximum that we could expect for any one project is $5.4 million, but with 10 other minor league teams out in the state, it's realistic to assume that it would be more in the $3 million threshold. So that 630 to 485 number is probably realistic if the state money comes through. So impact on CIP projects. So if we're utilizing fund balance, no effect on currently planned projects. And we have the ability to incrementally increase the CIP contribution over the next 2 to 3 years up to the total of the new debt burden. So if we land at 875, up to that. If we're in that 500 number, up to 500. And the biggest one here is that all currently planned and budgeted projects would move forward as scheduled. Any questions on the funding side? Nope.
We actually just had a work session where we heard virtually the same thing, so this isn't like we already know everything, but we kind of already have heard it today.
Okay, cool.
Will the county be a pass-through for state
Oh,
funding?
this question I did ask
Or
Chris.
No.
will the
so
owner receive the money straight from the state?
in theory, if everything is similar to how the legislation was written last year that didn't go through, the owner of the stadium would apply for the grant, so it would come straight from the state to the city.
So it would be a direct allocation to us.
And I did receive confirmation, the name of the entity that would be the grantor on the lease would be DeWine Enterprises Incorporated. So we do know what that entity is as well.
And one of the questions I had earlier that I think probably could like firm up a little bit is when I'm getting questions from proximal neighbors, they bring up issues with parking, issues with the Hunt Hill facility, what's the future of us really supporting the whole area? But another one that came up that I really appreciated and added to my understanding is folks feel like we don't do a really great job maintaining our contracts. We don't do a great job of maintaining our facilities historically, and we hear the word deferred maintenance a lot, and the price tag gets really expensive. So I think one of the questions for me that is still really strong today is what happens if the contract fails? What are our mechanisms for ensuring that we can keep our deal for the people of Asheville and maintain this facility?
Chris has had enough limelight. That is an excellent question, and I will always start by saying that there is a degree of risk with any contract. Our goal as city staff, and specifically Chris and his department, as well as our city attorney's office staff, is to mitigate that risk to the greatest degree, specifically on issues that you brought up, Councilwoman Roney. In this particular case, we are looking to include in the contract as a contractual obligation a guarantee that would essentially act as an insurance policy for the contractual fulfillment by the team in this case. So if we have a worse or very bad situation occur, worst case scenario is that we would have that grant included in this language. And although we're still trying to firm up exactly the details of that, any vote that council takes this evening to authorize moving forward would only allow us to go forward and finalize those kind of agreements. So we would not be entering into that until those elements were finalized, included, and you had not only the obligation of the team, but the obligation of that that guarantor as the backup option to give us a great deal more protection from any of those bad situations.
I also just wanted to say thanks, because I brought this up a lot, but some cities are losing their teams and would like to have our team. But one of the things I really appreciated was that we're looking at that creative way to make sure that there's also non-baseball use off-season, so that it really is the people's park, and we use it for baseball, but it can also be for graduations and weddings and winter events and community events, neighborhood events, food security issues. So thank you for hearing that part about not just looking up front, but looking at phasing it up over time, because this is such a long contract.
Thank you. And to follow on Brad's point, to be clear, the request tonight is just to approve a funding letter, right? So we'll be back later with the approval for a lease when we get through probably 2 months of the details of a lease negotiation and getting that out. We have the deal points, but now we have to write it. So that would come later. So back to the key takeaways. I won't go through this again for the 4th time today, but we leave it with a staff recommendation of a motion to approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a funding letter of commitment addressed to Major League Baseball regarding the city's intent to bring McCormick Field into compliance with the new Player Development League facility standards. Any other questions?
Okay, so.
Can
you're
you
looking-
remind me how the process goes
This is
now?
how the process is going to go. Okay. So for these kinds of items on our agenda, meaning under new business or old business, we would first need a motion to approve and a second, and then we will begin taking public comment. However, also, council, if you have questions or want to make comments before we do that, that's fine too. But bottom line is we'll get a motion and a second, and then we'll begin public comment.
I'm happy to make a baseball
We
enthusiastic
have a
motion.
baseball enthusiastic recommended motion up there.
Let's play ball. I motion to approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a funding letter of commitment addressed to Major League Baseball regarding the city's intent to bring McCormick Field into compliance with new Player Development League facility standards.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and we do have a bunch of people signed up to speak. I will just say we have had many meetings about this, and I see a lot of new faces in here tonight, so I don't know if you all probably watched every single one of them on our YouTube channel. I don't know, but this has come a long way. You know, this has been you know, kind of an interesting process because we were experiencing COVID and the team only had a kind of a normal season, if you will, this last summer, and we got a kind of a good picture of what this could look like. Personally, you know, I think this facility needs a great amount of investment regardless, but it is a great opportunity to host a wonderful baseball team and a family-friendly, fun activity for people to enjoy. I'm a mom of former baseball players, but despite my best efforts, they ended up in track and wrestling and stuff. But we did baseball through middle school. But it is, you know, we don't have a lot of opportunities for families to do activities in our city. We have a lot of adult activities, but I think this is a really important one that resonates with a lot of people in the community. And I think the team's done a great job of working with our community, hiring a lot of people, working with a lot of nonprofits, our schools to come and work in concessions and make money for their programs. So a lot of neat opportunities there. I got married in 1998, and my wedding party spent Thirsty Thursday having fun before my wedding at the tourist game. So it just makes a lot of memories for a lot of people. Including myself. So I'm excited that I think we have figured this out. It is, you know, we got a big effort from the tourists to contribute to this, and from the county and the city, and hopefully, and you've seen up there, there's an ask in to the state. The legislature will be considering this funding possibility in their budget cycle, which is happening now. So after everyone leaves here, start sending your emails that you've been sending to us, to your county officials, to your state representatives, to see what other funds we can generate for this project. So that's kind of where I'm landing on this, and excited to hear from you all tonight. I know not everyone is supportive, but we have gotten a lot of feedback of general support from the community overall. Anyone else want to questions, comments?
I'll jump in with a couple thoughts. Where I started with this project is different than where I'm landing. We've gotten, last count, like 1,700 emails. I have not read all of them, but I've read like most of them, which I feel like I might deserve a cookie for, but nonetheless, there's a lot of people talking about this, and there's a lot of points that when I first would hear a concern about this really stuck with me. And I sat and I chewed on it, and I talked to people, and I thought about it, and I crunched numbers. And so I just want to talk through some of the things that were most concerning to me and where I'm kind of landing with them. The first one is that I really needed to know if we were going to say yes, what were we going to have to say no to? That's just a fiscal responsibility. in the proposal that we're hearing from staff today, we don't have to take our foot off the gas on the infrastructure that we're currently planned for. We don't need to delay sidewalks or streets. We can have that type of infrastructure improvement and an improved outdoor facility. So that was assuring. The second thing is that we have a long list of needs, and I mean, just to be real, is baseball a top priority? There's a lot of people that are really concerned about that, and I understand that. And I think where I have landed is that we do have so many challenges in our community, but we can't only focus on the problems. We need to invest in the good things too, or they'll tarnish. And right now, 75% of the people that come to this space are us. It's like one of the only places I can think of that's so locally focused, and we need to keep investing in the places that keep us Asheville or Buncombe County. And really the third concern I had was, are we getting a fair deal? I hear a lot of folks saying, okay, are we spending all this money for a private company? And at the gracious offer of this team, I went and looked at tax returns for 5 years on Friday. And then I was like, I actually got some more questions. So I went back on Monday, and they showed me journal entries. They showed me multiple layers, probably more than is always necessary. But for me, that level of due diligence, I assure you, the tourists are not Scrooge McDuck sitting on a pool full of doubloons. You know, they're when they make money, they're investing it back into the team. They're making an honest living. They're a good community partner. And I think that is really evidenced in the amount of change we've seen from the starting proposal to this final proposal of the partnership that we're looking at. And those three things took me a long time, up until honestly yesterday, to really say, you know what, this is a lot of money. We do have a lot of priorities, but I want to invest in the good things in our town as well as investing in the challenges we have. So I've really come a long way. I appreciate everyone who I've talked with about this. I appreciate the team and the neighborhoods, but I'm really excited. Thanks.
I appreciate that input. That was good. I just want to share one perspective, in that I've only been doing this a couple of years, and I've always been wowed by the level of emails we get. They're across the board. But all the time we hear about projects, we hear about sidewalks, we hear about events, we hear about a policy here and there. But this was the first time I got flooded with emails about a family experience or a cherished memory, or, as the mayor said, a wedding party, a childhood event. I mean, we don't get a lot of emails like that really speak to the experience of living in a city as opposed to one little facet. Like, it really spoke to the way that this institution has changed and impacted lives over and over and over. And I just wanted to share that because we don't get that a lot, and I thought it meant a lot.
Any other questions or comments before we take public comment?
I have one comment. So I just went ahead and wrote this out because I've been thinking a lot about this. Asheville has been pitched a narrative. It's either tourists or no baseball at our public McCormick Field. I think there's more to the game, including how and when our public park facility is used and who benefits. I'm a baseball fan. I have Major League Baseball on 3 branches of my family tree. I've enjoyed tourist games at McCormick Field with friends and neighbors of all ages. And if we lose the tourists, we've negotiated guarantees to ensure financial stability, and we can still program baseball activity at our McCormick Field. Considering urgent priorities in our community, I honestly struggled to put this on the front burner. So I took a behind-the-scenes tour of the facility. I read every single email. Thank you. Some of you actually got 2 responses back, which informed the more than 50 questions I presented to staff, including issues around Asheville's goals to address neighborhood resiliency, equity and engagement, especially the historic East and Valley Street, and economic development, as well as funding, logistics, and the history of baseball in Asheville and this facility, including the champion Asheville Blues of 1946 and 1947. Thank you to everyone pitching ideas, calling for support of affordable, family-friendly spaces and events. I know we can't save minor league baseball, though we've been asked to, which honestly as an industry extracts the labor of players. And I know we can't save the tourists, which is up to the management of the owners of the team. But I can root for the home team, which is why I support a vastly improved contract for the people of Asheville and the maintenance of our facility. And it's why I'm calling for and ready to support this better contract.
Anybody else?
I'll just share that we received 35 pages of public comments that I guess you can submit up to the week before, or a few days before. I did read through those 35 pages and then
They were emailed in.
Yes,
Yep.
they were emailed in, and there were 3, just sharing this in case you didn't get time to read all 35 pages. There were 3 that did not support, and then all the others did support finding a way to fund this.
Okay, so if you're counting, I'm just letting you know out there. So I'm gonna call the speakers in order. I'm gonna tell you if you're on deck, and we use that before this was a baseball thing. But we have one speaker that has folks that have deferred to them. That's Brian DeWine. He's our first speaker. So we have 3 people. Janie, Janie, you're gonna tell us. So your last name. Janie, raise your hand. And Alyssa Quirk and Doug Marr? Yes, okay, so the 3 of you have deferred your time to Brian DeWine, so he gets to have 10 minutes. And then you all are ceding your time, so you won't be speaking. And then on deck is gonna be Nina Tovish. So Brian, if you'll come forward, and you have up to 10 minutes to speak.
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate everyone here's work, Chris's work, all the city staff's work on this. It's been a long 2 years, but I appreciate your work on this. For all of you who don't know me, my name is Brian DeWine, and I'm the controlling owner of the Asheville Tourist. 13 years ago, my wife and I chose to move to Asheville with our infant son to raise a family and run a ballpark our community would be proud to call theirs. Since then, we've had 2 more children, both born at Mission Hospital. Our family has been a part of 800 games in McCormick Field. At each one of those games, we felt like a steward of this amazing city asset, McCormick Field. We have worked to provide safe and affordable entertainment to our community. Baseball is a game of numbers, so let's talk about numbers. $9.8 million annual impact, $600,000 a year in cash and in-kind gifts, 180,000 fans a year, $140,000 that local nonprofits earn while working in our concession stands. The $50,000 in need-based scholarships we do each year, the 10,000 students in Mr. Moon's reading program, and the near 200 local vendors that we use every year. And the one I'm actually the most proud of is the 40 first jobs that we have each year that we provide. These jobs, they change people's lives. I could talk about these numbers and take us into extra innings, but what is most important to talk about is what we cannot measure. It is the reason we moved to Asheville. We love baseball. But we love what minor league baseball does for a community more. It is why we believe this ballpark is the center of the community. This team, this ballpark, is a place for our city to connect and build community. At the ballpark, we cannot measure the number of friends we reunite with, the first dates that occur, the family bonding moments, or the lives that are enriched. And then there's the impact our team, our staff, and our fans, many are here, carry out to the community. Just last week, Mr. Moon presented My Daddy Taught Me That with a check to support their work with youth. Mr. Moon visits schools regularly to read to students and hosts a reading program to encourage literacy across our community. One of my favorite stories I hear over and over again is about community members, and I'm sure you guys all heard the same stories, community members who took their sulky teenagers to a game, and for 3 hours, dad and mom were cool again. The cell phone stayed in the pocket, and they had a blast, and they told them all about their life. The number one reason the team is here is to add the quality of life to the community. This ballpark does not belong to one person, it belongs to the community that gathers in it. Are any of us happy that there's a deadline for Major League Baseball approaching? No. But does the ballpark need the repairs, the upgrades, and the female facilities? Yes. The city, county, and I have been trusted with the responsibility of making sure the community can continue to gather, build relationships, and make memories. Although baseball is a game of numbers, the most important part of the game cannot be measured in numbers. Thank you. I appreciate everyone.
Thank you. All right, baseball people, we have a no clapping rule in here, but I know that'll be hard.
But you can do the wave.
Yeah, yeah, we don't have a no wave policy.
Yeah. That would be fun.
That'd be a first. Okay, next is Nina Tovish, and then Bob Kearney is on deck.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'd like to begin by saying that I personally have a real fondness for McCormick Field and the Tourists franchise. Such a charming human-scaled facility, such a pleasure to watch a game up close and personal. It's a joy to spend a warm summer evening enjoying a home game along with my neighbors. I delight in the local baseball experience, and I appreciate the broad support that it enjoys. And here comes the but. But I do not believe this proposed deal aligns with our city's deep needs and priorities. But it subsidizes a private business at the expense of the city's many priorities that are currently needing budgetary support. And I think here of urgently needed affordable housing, about which we just heard, or transit, for example, where the master plan has yet to be fully funded. But it will commit TDA funds for this purpose at the expense of other alternatives for the city. And what happens if the TDA funds dry up for some reason? Will the city be on the hook for the balance? But the commitment of the tourists is, I believe, for only 7 years, yet we'll be paying for 20 years no matter what happens. What if MLB withdraws support for the tourists? What if the tourists go belly up or move? What happens if we have a fancy finished facility with no team to use it? What if MLB comes back with yet more expensive requirements in a few years' time? But broad economic analyses suggest that stadium funding or renovation generally do not reliably return the greatest economic benefit to municipalities. For me, the overall question remains, is this truly the best use for $37 million of the city's limited fiscal resources? I appreciated hearing from Councilwoman Ullman that she's worked through this and she believed that it does. I wish I could say that I was also convinced. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Bob Kearney, and then Guy Skinner is on deck.
Do we introduce ourselves first before the timer?
When you say your name, Mr. Kearney, I'll start it.
I'm Bob Kearney, 19-year full-time resident of Western North Carolina, married 50 years with 2 grown daughters. I feel like the horse has left the barn, so this feels very futile, but I do want to make some points for your record. Having a clear perspective is crucial. I went directly from college to a sports writing position with one of the top 10 newspapers in America. And later I worked 7 years as the PR director of a team in the National Football League. I've been to 5 Super Bowls, 4 of them in the press box. So I've been around sports a few times. We've witnessed many sports franchises strong-arming cities for taxpayer-funded stadiums. We might resent it, but the demands of Major League Baseball are not going to go away. So I advocate 3 steps. I'm not opposed to supporting the stadium, but I advocate these 3 steps. Drastically reduce the price tag to a manageable $15 million, or else drastically increase the financial participation by the owner of the tours to 1/3 of the eventual price tag. The value of the tourist would rise from the $7 million they paid for it in 2010 to at least $25 million with all the new amenities, according to investment bankers, investment experts that I consulted. Number 2, retain, and this is important, retain the city the naming rights to McCormick Field, bringing tens of thousands of dollars to the city instead of giving it away for 20 years to the tourists. And 3rd, reject any contractual requirement that forces the city to make future unspecified capital improvements. Just collect the rent and keep it. There are thousands upon thousands of sports events televised nationally, not just college and pro versions of football, basketball, and baseball. Competition in golf, tennis, softball, gymnastics, boxing, and mixed martial arts all get their airtime. Throw in summer and winter Olympics, World Cup soccer, Wimbledon tennis, Masters golf, auto racing. You have the tip of the iceberg. And yet, with 120 minor league baseball teams in this country, you cannot find a single game that interests the world of television. Not a single one. Now think of it this way. In the entire universe of televised sports, among those thousands and thousands of events, televised minor league baseball cannot be found with the Hubble telescope. The proposals are to spend upward of $56 million, including interest, to benefit this invisible sport run by a private for-profit business.
Thank you. Sir, and you have provided your comments for us, so I appreciate that. We can review the rest. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. I only say not to abandon the tourists, but to spend judiciously.
Thank you. Guy Skinner and then Kevin Ring.
My name is Guy Skinner. I've lived here a long time. I wanted to touch on all your points. It was really heartwarming to hear, the fact, how important is baseball? I always think of Field of Dreams. Build it, Terrence Mann, build it, they will come, I was gonna had a lot of comments, oh, your family, and so, I was at one game and a guy from Boston had his bachelor party at McCormick Field. Yeah. I don't think it was a Thirsty Thursday, but it should have been. and your point about all the family things, I wrote a few emails with the family things. And one of our dear friends is on watching it. He's been sending pictures of making sure I didn't pick my nose or anything while I was listening to this. And I had some things to say about when I grew up here. My grandmother moved here in the 40s, and I used to go to games when I was in the 60s, and I can still sit there and close my eyes and feel the heat. But in my 12 years of college and graduate school, I had some comments, and then I realized one of our best friends from Minnesota, who said all these notes, Jared Warner. He's there. Y'all need to read his comments. I realized that he's an elementary school teacher, and he's much more eloquent than I could ever be. And part of it involves, we met them in 2015 at the All-Star game, and I can't read his comments about that because I'm about to cry. Anyway, but he says, I've been blessed to have gone to over 40 stadiums in minor leagues, and without hesitation, McCormick Field is at the top of the list. I live in Minnesota, and yet I've been to more tourist games than any other affiliated team. The ambience, the views, the people, the organization, the players, just knowing that we're watching the stars of tomorrow, this makes the difference in the world. Having the gem of a stadium and all its storied past, nestled in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains, is pure America. And you were talking about watching baseball games on TV. Our friends in Minnesota, they watch every game. They listen. They're always talking, hey, I hear Doug. And after the game on the way home, they're always sending their opinion on, what happened. So it is more than as much as it is local, and we love it, and it's a gem of ours. Like I said, 26% of the people from out of North Carolina. We have friends from Ohio, Minnesota, Tennessee, all these people. They come, and the one thing they have in common is that we want to go to a tourist game, that and papas and beer. But, but everybody, do I get paid for that commercial? Okay, but we love the tourists. Thank you for your positive comments.
Good work. And that's how it's done, everybody. Okay, the next is Kevin Ring and then Frank Capelli.
Mayor Manheimer and the City Council, my name is Kevin Ring, and I'm hoping that you will support this proposal this evening. The tourists have published many impressive figures about the economic impact of professional baseball here in Asheville. Those numbers are real and they are important, but they are not the reason you should support this. The history of the field is important. Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson, Eddie Murray, Cal Ripken Sr. and Jr. That history is not why you should support these upgrades. My family started attending tourist games when our son was 2 years old. He's now a sophomore playing high school baseball. When we first attended games, it wasn't because we hoped he would become a baseball player or even develop a love for the game. It was because it was an affordable way to go out with the family and have a fun night. Outside of baseball, our son had his bar mitzvah at McCormick Field during COVID, when that was the only place that anyone could really gather. Last year, over 170,000 people passed through the gates at McCormick Field. I know that some of them are diehard seamheads that simply love the game of baseball. But if you polled the crowd on any given night, the majority are there for the reasons that I started going. As you know, Major League Baseball has made it clear that these upgrades are mandatory for the tourists to remain in Asheville. It was a blessing that Asheville was even given this chance. 43 cities lost their minor league teams by force during COVID. Those cities were not afforded the opportunity to make this decision. If you vote not to fund these upgrades, McCormick Field will be left vacant. Without a tenant, the park will surely deteriorate quickly. And if you doubt this, head up I-26 to look at the former Appalachian League ballparks in East Tennessee, where they now play host to a few dozen college summer league games and some travel baseball, or to Greensboro, where that park was replaced by another, and War Memorial Stadium hosts North Carolina A&T baseball games, but 80% or so of the stands are cordoned off because they've deteriorated to the point that they're not safe. We are 3 weeks from the 99th anniversary of the official opening of McCormick Field, and your decision today will determine the future of professional baseball in Asheville. A vote against these improvements is a vote to deny the next 5 generations in our city the opportunity that we have all been afforded to have an affordable night out with our family, watching the most uniquely American game. Past leaders of the city thought this so important to protect, they actually took ownership of the team in order to preserve it. The city is fortunate today to have passionate ownership that wants to keep the team here. I know that there are always competing priorities for city funding, but this is your only opportunity to save professional baseball in Asheville and the gym that is McCormick Field. I ask that you please vote to support this funding and preserve the future of professional baseball in Asheville. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Frank Capelli, and then Leo Capelli, who I assume is related to Frank. It looks like Leo, oh, maybe more Capellis are behind you.
So I had two of my other boys and my wife were here. They've already dropped out. I mean, honestly, what you just said is pretty much similar to what I'm going to say is here. But I'm here to speak. My name's Frank Capelli. I'm from Black Mountain. This is Charlie. This is Leo right here. I had to speak on behalf of the citizens of our region in favor of funding these renovations to McCormick Field that have been pushed upon the city of Asheville and the Asheville tourists by Major League Baseball. Just please do everything you can to keep this professional team here in Asheville. We are the envy of Charleston, West Virginia, Bluefield, West Virginia, Bristol, Virginia, Burlington, North Carolina, Danville, Virginia, Elizabethton, Tennessee, Greenville, Tennessee, Johnson City, Tennessee, Kingsport, Tennessee, Princeton, West Virginia. Those are 10 regional cities within a couple hours drive of us right here. They all had minor league baseball teams back in 2018. They don't have them anymore. They didn't have a choice. They didn't have a say whether they were going to keep their baseball teams. Major League Baseball stripped those cities of their teams. They didn't ask them to meet halfway without a thought of how their impact of that decision would have on the local communities. They took their baseballs and they went home. 42 cities, just like Asheville, had their minor league teams taken away a couple years ago. Asheville's not a television market. We don't have the advertising dollars that the Charlottes and the Atlantas have. Doesn't mean our citizens shouldn't deserve a team that we can root for and call our own at the professional level. We lost our minor league hockey team a few years ago. Go ask your colleagues down in Greenville how they like having the Greenville Swamp Rabbits minor league hockey team in town. That used to be the Asheville Smoke. The short-sighted decision in 2002 made it so the city didn't have the facilities to operate a hockey rink anymore. Smoke left for Greenville. Don't let that happen again. You have the opportunity that 42 cities, just like ours, didn't have just 3 years ago. An opportunity that the citizens of those cities would kill for. I know people in Johnson City. They were devastated when this happened. No, it might seem dramatic, hyperbolic, but you've got the power to make sure that 126 years of professional baseball continues here in Asheville, excuse me. If you don't act now, professional Asheville in baseball in over 125 years ceases to exist. So please support that. Thank you, guys. Leo is up next.
Okay, just pull that mic down.
Okay, Leo, come on down. Just speak.
Okay, Maggie, you got it? Sometimes she accidentally buzzes people. Okay.
Hi, my name is Leo Capelli, and I am here to talk about why I want to fund the stadium renovations being requested by Major League Baseball. If you haven't experienced the magic yourself, I recommend you go take in a game or a few this season. I love baseball. When I'm not playing on my own in Black Mountain, my favorite thing to do is catch a tourist game over at McCormick Field. In fact, some of my fondest life memories involve watching baseball at the oldest baseball stadium in minor league baseball. The best is if you catch a game on Friday night during the summer. If you time it just right, you need to head over to the Dippin' Dots stand about 4 minutes before the first firework is set off. Nothing is more magical than seeing those fireworks exploding in the warm Asheville summer nights over McCormick Field. I also have grown up at McCormick Field. My dad lets my brother and I bring $7 to each game to spend it on whatever we want. Did you know the most efficient way to spend $14 is to make sure you go on Dollar Dog Night? You convince your brother to split peanuts with you, then you can both still get your own Dippin' Dots. Did you know you could teach financial literacy at a baseball game? Heck, my dream job is one day to be the bat boy for the tourists. It was rite of passage for me the first time I left our seats and ordered something from the concession stand on my own. Just like it was a rite of passage for my little brother Daniel last season when he was first allowed to leave our seats to fill up our water bottles on his own. I guess you can say that I've had it pretty good in life, for I was around to learn a lot of life's lessons at McCormick Field. If you don't save the tourists for my sake, do it for my little brothers, Charlie and Teddy here. Let me give them the same magical experience that I was able to have. Thank you.
That's the best public comment I've ever heard.
Are you sure anybody else wants to say anything? Okay. All right, brave David Meyer, you are next. And Ken Grant, you are on deck. Good job, Capelli family. David left. All right, how about Ken Grant? Good, smart decision there, David. All right, do we have, Ken Grant, and then Russ Rowers.
Towers.
Rowers.
It should be Towers.
Okay, there's an R. All right.
I don't know how to top that, but
Oh, yeah, that's hard.
I'll try. And a lot of the things, obviously, that I've prepared to say have been said already, but I just wanted to give my 2 cents. You know, I'm obviously here to support the funding of McCormick Field, and I wanted to give you just a glimpse of my personal experience working at the stadium, and also I'm a lifelong baseball fan, and I've traveled across the country going to minor league baseball stadiums, and I can tell you without a doubt that McCormick Field is second to none, and we are very lucky to have it, and I am really pleased to hear some of the positive comments from the council, and I'm looking forward to many more years of having our team here and having a great facility that the whole community can be proud of. I also see from the presentations, obviously you know all the economic data, and that's not really my role to talk about that, but from personal experience, I can tell you that when I'm at the stadium, I can feel the strong connection between the fans, the team, and the stadium itself, the history, and the city of Asheville. And the players have the word Asheville on their jersey, or at least when they're on the road. And it brings a lot of civic pride to all of us. And it's very important that we keep this team. I see, when I'm at the stadium, a really diverse fan base, and I see a lot of children, and that's the best part. I see a lot of kids, like Leo is up here, and I get the privilege of handing out these little buttons that say, "This is my first tourist game." Oh. And the faces light up, and I remember myself when I was a child, and I saw a professional baseball stadium for the first time, and I'll never forget that feeling. And that's something that we can give. We're in a small town. We can give that to our children in our town, and that's priceless. We are very lucky that we have the ability to do that. A professional sports team in a city really puts the city on the map. And I can tell you it's how startling it is to see the differences I've been to places where there used to be a team because I'm curious about baseball history. And I can see the devastation. I see stadiums filled with graffiti and overgrown weeds, and it's really sad. And you can feel it in the town. You can feel the sadness, and you can feel the town going in the wrong direction. But I can tell you that funding the stadium now is really going to make a statement that the council and our city wants to make an investment in our people and wants to create something that I believe the role of government is to create. Government is, in my opinion, one of the overlooked things about the role of government is to do big things that we can't do ourselves. And this is a big thing that we can't do ourselves. And it's so important, and it's going to be a wonderful legacy that you're going to leave to this city. And it's going to be great for baseball, but it's also going to be great for other events, and it's going to be a sparkling gem. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Russ Towers. There's a lot of tourist swag happening here tonight. Yeah.
I've got a lot more at home. So do these folks too. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for the opportunity to address you tonight. I've been a lifelong baseball fan, and I've been in Asheville since 2000 and have regularly attended tourist games throughout that time, probably neighborhood of 200 games. That's a lot of peanuts and beer through the years. Looking in the audience, I see a lot of season ticket holders that have been to probably thousands of games over the years, and it's, you've already heard from Chris and others about some of the economic benefits and all the statistics that Brian presented. I wanted to bring it kind of to a personal level. I was going to talk about amenities for the city, and that it's a great amenity for the city, just like sports fields and greenways and parks and other things. And I think we have to take care of those things, and this is one of those amenities that needs that support. But I wanted to bring it to a personal level and kind of go beyond that. I have been to a lot of minor league baseball parks around the country through the years. I've been to some within the Sally League that the tourists play in, and most of those are much newer and much, much better condition than what we have. We have a great historic ballpark, but it's one that really needs to be upgraded to stay competitive within the industry and within for the team itself, and for the fans to enjoy. So I want to just take it down to a personal level. I brought my son to a game when he was less than a year old. A few years later, he had a birthday party there, and then his first paycheck as a 14-year-old was as a bat boy for the Asheville Tourists. So Leo, you can start when you're 14 to get that first paycheck. And this is my son in the dugout with one of the players celebrating their birthday together a few years ago. And he cherished the 2 seasons that he had to play, be a bat boy. I also want to bring a personal connection from a business standpoint. I own a business called Second Gear, and we advertise with the tourists. We've spent thousands of dollars advertising, and so as the term goes, I think we put our money where our mouth is, and I think other businesses see the value too of the connections they can make with both the attendees and other businesses that are supporting supporting the team. Finally, I wanted to say about, on a personal level, of all the employees that work for the tourists, you've got year-round people that rely on this, for their livelihood, as well as it's a great opportunity for people to work seasonally. They have 80 to 100 people that work seasonally, and that's important for our economy and for our city. So I have two asks to finish up.
You can email it to us.
I'll email those two asks for you.
All right, thank you. Okay, Glenn Wright and then Jonathan Wainscott. Glenn Wright here? Yes. And everyone who, there should be no one left in the overflow room, right?
Everyone down there wants to stay down there.
Okay. Okay, well.
I moved here not quite 2 years ago from Colorado, and as looking for a place to move to when I retired, I was looking for more moderate climate than Colorado. I was looking for less traffic. You might think the traffic's bad here, but go check it out in Metro Denver. But the primary thing that brought me here was that we had a baseball team. And I've been to, the tourists have played roughly 100 games since I've been here. And I've attended all but 4 of them and the only reason I missed those 4 is I was out of town. That's what I do in the spring and the summer. I watch baseball. And quite honestly, if we lost the baseball team, I would seriously consider moving to another city where they had a baseball team. It's that important to me. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. After Jonathan Wainscott is David Turner. Maggie, we have a president.
Maggie? Huh?
I thought there were
I have
2.
2.
There's 2.
No, I didn't.
I think I just eye rolled you. Don't worry, she doesn't at me.
Oh, well, I'll do it without the
Visual.
the visual. That's all right. That's quite all right. My name's Jonathan Wainscott. I lived in Asheville for 24 years. Clearly, this is being funded. I don't want to see the tourists go anywhere, so I'm not trying to tell you not to do it. I did want to thank you for having an updated lease. It was, I believe, in 2018. I came to council and pointed out that the lease had expired in 2016 and it hadn't even been renewed. And I think we had to wait until we had Deborah Campbell on board as a full manager. That was the first thing that you did on your first night of being a manager, was to renew the lease here. So it did get a little bit sloppy. So I'm glad that that's happening. Of course, I would like to talk about the Tourism Development Authority and how it should be their responsibility for paying for this. It's not the role of government to do this. It's the role of a quasi-governmental agency called the Tourism Development Authority, who is collecting $46 million a year, half of which needs to go into the Tourism Product Development Fund for projects exactly like this. They're collecting $2 million a month. They could pay for this entire project in a year and a half, and we wouldn't have to pay for any of it. So, you know, the fact that taxpayers, the city of Asheville taxpayers are on the hook for it, Buncombe County taxpayers are on the hook for it, North Carolina state taxpayers are on the hook for it if we get the grant. And I heard a lot of ifs this happens, hopefully this will happen. We don't even have a drawing of anything yet, and we're going to commit to the funding on this. I think the questions of like what happens if this gets half built and it, you know, doesn't come through. I've never seen anything be done on time and on budget, and this is very last minute here. And I would also point out that the $9.8 million this contributes to the local economy. We have a $4.5 billion tourism economy now here in Asheville. So this is a tiny drop in the bucket. $10 million versus $1,500 million is the factor by which this great economic impact is. I just don't think it's the responsibility of the city anymore to do this. I want my streets paved, and I'm not going to be able to get that any sooner by doing this. The benefit of the tourist tax here, the hotel tax, the room tax, whatever you want to call it, is to alleviate our property tax burden. And they're not doing it. I mean, they're just so greedy over there. It's just absolutely disgusting that they're not going to let go of this money. It's their job to build this stuff. It's not our job to do it. And so it's probably a good thing we didn't have the visuals. I was going to compare the length of a hot dog bun to the, anyway. So anyway, I know that you're going to vote for this, and yeah, I'm glad that the city's got the tourists. It's just not our job anymore to do that for them.
Thank you. Maggie, we reset that. The next person signed up to speak is David Turner and then Paul Howell.
First time ever speaking. I'm part of the soccer community and have nothing against baseball at all, but after sort of sitting on the sideline of the Memorial Stadium discussion and finding out that it's not going to be wide enough to house USL soccer, I'm not part of that organization, but the women's team did have record-setting attendance last year. They have a diverse ownership group, minority-owned, diverse, inclusive community in the soccer community. There are only black or minority owners in the MLS. They're basketball players. There are no black and minority owners in NFL, Major League Baseball. Basketball has Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson. Prior to this, we were talking about the need for housing and mental health and
Excuse me, they're asking that you talk in a mic. They can't hear
They
you.
can't hear you.
You're very quiet,
Peek it up, yeah, point it up.
but you're
Can I
really
start my
tall, so it's
time
not,
over?
yeah, we don't need like an extension.
Okay, so records, where do I need to start? Start
You're
over?
fine, just keep going.
Yeah, just
Okay.
keep going.
So I put on the Beer City Cup, and now Memorial Stadium is not wide enough so that we can't host the finals there. We did that for the first 8 years. Demp Bradford did an economic study on the tournament. We have a $3.1 million impact in 2 days. The tourists are pulling in 9.8 in 70 games. I know that's a small drop in the bucket. We're a smaller drop in the bucket, but it is a big impact in 2 days, bigger than the Billie Jean King tennis tournament. I do agree that we shouldn't be using our tax dollars to subsidize a for-profit private entity, especially since it's based out of state. It's at least 10 times more than we're putting forward towards Memorial Stadium. East End Neighborhood Association did not get a fair share there. Their track may be nice, but the concrete stands need to go. The press box is dangerous. Metal stands doesn't matter. So I agree with Mr. Kearney and Ms. Tovish on a number of things. We did lose the smoke based on bad decisions. I don't know how long Asheville City Soccer Club will remain here without Memorial Stadium, but when we agreed to use Memorial only every other year when the tourists were out of town, that was 2 years on, 2 years off. That lasted for one term, and then they had 3 years at home, so we had to scramble and all host everything at JBL. So, the U.S. national team is mostly minorities. We hosted Jess McDonald. She's the only African-American national team player, won the World Cup. She came to our tournament. We're an inclusive community. I feel like we've only had so many speakers, and it doesn't seem like there's any minorities. Thank you.
Mr. Turner, I would ask that you speak with D. Tyrell McGirt, raise your hand, our Parks and Rec director back there, as well as Chris Corral. If you would, who's in the front, maybe work with them to put together a meeting to talk through some of the things that you raised around Memorial, that would be. I mean, yes, Memorial is a done decision, but I was under the impression that soccer could apply for a variance. So but I would like you to work with our Parks and Rec director and with Chris Corral.
Does soccer know they can
We
get a
can't
variance?
deal with it right now. Grab
I know,
those
that's
two,
okay.
grab them afterwards.
D. Tyrell McGirt, will you raise your hand back there so he sees you, and Chris Corral? Thank you. Okay, and then Paul Howell.
Well, good evening there, Madam Mayor, Councilwomen, City Manager, City Attorney, and of course Maggie. Yes, always got there. My first baseball game was in 1972 when the Tourists was in the midst of being the Asheville Orioles. I think my granddad might pay, 75 cents, $1, something like that for me to go in the game. I wasn't worried about the prices. Because once I got in, I wanted to leave out with the rest of the little kids and go out behind the fence and try to catch home runs. Well, unfortunately, I didn't catch no home runs, so I stayed outside the game and missed the game. But I did get to go to King Arthur after it was over with. I was kind of hesitant about this thing here about the baseball team, but then I got to thinking about all the help that we got from the tourists when we had Juneteenth over at MLK Park. I got to thinking about the help that the management of the tourists gave our kid vendors, inviting them to come down to the stadium. And then, some of them had never done nothing like that, and they enjoyed it, and they're looking forward to doing it again. I'm apprehensive, though, because by the time y'all do all these renovations to catch up with where you need to be at, you're going to be back behind again. So it seems like y'all would come, the city, the TDA, the county, whoever, and the YNC group, all come together and try to come up with a way to build a new stadium that will be up to par when it's built and not trying to get caught up to something. You know, I feel that they have really been shorted by being squeezed into the little space that they're in. Although it's a historical place, it's just too small. Inadequate parking. I mean, people got to park all the way up doggone Martin Luther King by St. John A. Church up through there, St. John Baptist Church up on the hill. I know your dad's
It's Nazareth.
yeah, well, Nazareth. Nazareth, St. James at the end. I'm thinking about St. John. But Nazareth, cars parked all the way up there and people walking all the way back down to the stadium. That doesn't make sense. There should be something developed where y'all can keep the things going right now with the team and still come out with a plan to build a new stadium and use the old stadium for high school baseball, little league baseball, girls softball, I mean, everything. And get us a little league World Series team here or something. Do something for the community. Put some time, put some money into the community, into these places. I know y'all probably already made up y'all's mind, so it's foregone. But yet still, I think they deserve more than trying to bring the stadium up to par. I really do. Because it's not gonna last. That's the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that was the last person signed up to speak. We have a motion to approve and a second. Council, do we have any other questions?
Just one clarifying comment, because I heard about tourism tax dollars paying for it all and stuff, and I just want to make sure I'm under the right impression that under current legislation, the TDA or the CBB, whoever, has offered up as much as they can literally legally put forth, correct?
Right, if it, under a financing mechanism, where it's debt financed, they have maxed out the percentage they're allowed to contribute.
Now, I'm not saying, should it be better or could it be better,
Right,
but
it
under the
would
current
require-
legislation, they are putting forth all that they are allowed to do. I just want to make sure that was clear.
I also had one, something I heard is this idea of like, what is the economic benefit? And we're government. If we go down the road of having all of our services have to justify an economic benefit, we're in trouble. Our parks are here for joy and recreation and family and time. And this is our building. This isn't a private company's building. This is a city facility. So I know that there are times where we use economic benefit to justify investment, but I mean, the heart and soul we're hearing in this room right now doesn't have a dollar figure to it.
One other, a couple other points I just wanted to make. We did see there's some good data around who visits this facility right now. And about a quarter of it is from the city of Asheville, and then outside the city, but within Buncombe County. And I know the Buncombe County Commissioners will strongly consider that as they weigh next week their decision whether or not to help support this project. But we also serve folks from around the region, Henderson County and Madison County, coming over from our areas around here. And I think as we continue to think about our relationship with the broader community, Western North Carolina, it's important to me that we have our region able to visit us and experience a positive thing and coming to our community and taking that back home with them so that we continue to maintain a relationship with folks across our region. Even if we might be politically divided or otherwise divided, we can have a shared love around a fun moment, a joyous moment. I'll share with you, I think that one of the functions of a city is to provide opportunities for people to spend time together in recreation and having fun. I went to a Dodgers-Mets game this summer when I was up in New York, and at a sold-out stadium that was a transformational experience for me. I'd love to go to baseball games in other cities, but just listening to the crowd singing together and that moment of people being together is something you can't just replicate. You have to just provide the opportunity, and then people will seize it. And it does change lives, and it does enhance the quality of life that people experience. And I think it's not everyone's cup of tea. Maybe they like to enjoy our greenways in the River Arts District, or they want to go play Frisbee golf or whatever it is that they like. But to me, this is a place where people will experience that time together. And finally, I want to recognize when we began this journey, our city manager, Deborah Campbell, recognized the importance of this investment in this facility, and she really helped work behind the scenes with her staff, and especially Chris Corral, who should take a standing ovation, working very hard to make this work.
Could I hear first pitch?
And I have done the first pitch, and it was horrible. So I think maybe Deborah, she could give it a try. Don't feel bad if it bounces. Not saying that happened to me, but anyway, I just want to recognize that there's not people don't always realize how much goes into putting together something this monumental for us. So just know that that's happening. It's not all just magic, even if sometimes it seems like it. So, yes, you can clap. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and anything else?
Let's do it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Congratulations.
Let's do the wave. Come on, council.
I want to see the wave, right?
Yeah, I want to see the wave, right? All right, so you better all show up next week over at the county, and especially Leo, I think. You're going to need Leo. He's like your... Yeah. All right, folks, if you want to make your exit, this is probably your time to escape. We have a couple other items we're doing on the agenda, so please feel free. All right.
April 6th.
Right. Councilwoman Roney, I'm going to turn it over to you, but whenever you feel ready to take over.
The Boards and Commissions Committee met earlier this morning. Vice Mayor Kilgore was unable to attend, so I served as acting chair at her request. We reviewed 8 possible appointments, 7 of which were due to resignations.
Due to resignations, is that what I heard?
Is what it
It
reads
says
there.
8 appointments, 7 resignations because of 7.
7 openings.
Okay. Wait,
Um,
openings or resignations?
7 openings were due to resignations.
Okay,
is what it
gotcha,
reads. Yes. The first is the Asheville Area Riverfront Redevelopment Commission for consideration. The Boards and Commissions Committee recommends the appointment of Joseph Hackett. Can I get a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next, we have the Audit Committee. The Boards and Commissions Committee recommends the appointment of Debbie Evanchik. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. The Downtown Commission, Boards and Commissions Committee does not have a recommendation and defers to the full council for 2 vacancies. The chair of the Downtown Commission recommends the appointment of Nur Edwards and Eva Michelle Spicer. I will have a couple words here about my recommendation for Bill Cooney. So I was looking at section 2-77 of the code that established the Downtown Commission, and there are some very specific purposes and powers assigned to the members, including that downtown commissioners fill 4 out of 9 seats of the Design Review Committee, which reviews development projects within the Central Business District, the River Arts District, and hotel projects outside of those areas. So I compared the experience lost of previous and current appointees, as well as the balance, as we have multiple varied business experiences represented. Some of them have an automatic appointment feature, like the Downtown Business Association. So I asked that we consider asking, when considering the downtown review guidelines that has been suggested by Councilwoman Turner, I just hope we don't miss the opportunity to consider the extensive planning, infrastructure cost assessment, and public engagement experience needed, which Bill Cooney brings to the table. So I have a recommendation from the clerk's office that we might each lift up 2 names. And that in going through essentially a roll call, that would surface the answer. So shall we start at one side and go to the other?
Can I share a little input too? I'm the liaison to the Downtown Commission. And I spent a little time on this today, and I want to say first, I have been on the Downtown Commission, I think, before this for, 6-7 years. And this was the most amazing set of applicants I had seen. I'm thinking that it has something to do with the current matters facing downtown, but there was a great pool of people. Now, what I did hear across the board, whether it was from the design review members, the Downtown Commission members, that there was a notable absence of storefronts, just storefronts in general. People representing the businesses and the stores, and that's their business, it's their employees, and that we don't have that. So we have a series of architects. We recently lost 2 people. One was a landscape architect, and one was a business representative that was pretty passionate about design and stuff. So I don't know that we're trying to replace more architects. Now, I also know that there was a very thorough review of the applicants, and that a handful of them were fairly new to the community, which I believe your name was on that list, and that may be why. So I don't want to say that I would love to put all of these people on the commission personally, but I am going to defer to what I heard most commonly, which was representation of those storefronts. And yeah, for me, that was Nur Edwards and Eva Michelle Spicer. So, and that was also the 2 that the commission put forth. So if we need to do the 2 thing out of norm, we can. I'm also happy to make a motion that's in step with what the commission chair recommended.
And who did you just said?
Nur Edwards and Eva Michelle Spicer, which are 2 representatives of businesses downtown, the Discount Pharmacy and Spicer Greens.
So we also are anticipating additional openings that do represent downtown currently. So are the businesses, so we have the seat.
YMCA filled that seat. We have a representative on ADA that is the Y now, actually. She attended our meeting Friday.
Say that again from the
So
Y.
the ADA has a standard seat on this. It is open to either an appointment of the ADA board or executive director, and the executive director is currently empty and being sought. So in the interim, a woman that is the director for the YMCA is filling the seat on behalf of ADA.
And we're still going to be missing, due to the passing of the late Guillermo Rodriguez, we'll be needing to fill a design review committee seat.
And if you're familiar with Kimmy Hunter, that was our other loss, which was a great loss.
Indeed. So do we have any other questions before we do the round?
Can we start on this end?
Sure.
Nur Edwards and Eva Michelle Spicer.
Same.
I'm going to say David Moritz and Nora Edwards.
I'll go with the recommendation of the chair, Nora Edwards and Eva Spicer.
Nora Edwards and Bill Cooney.
I'll go with the recommendation of the chair, Nora Edwards and Eva Spicer.
Ms. Edwards got 6 and Ms. Spicer got 4. So those would be the 2 appointments.
Ms. Roney, I think there was something else about having that particular person on board that would have helped, and that is something that you and I continue to bring up, which is the impact that Urban 3 found in our property tax assessment and disparities. And I wondered if that was potentially why you also wanted to lift up that
Absolutely.
person, but I would encourage us to continue to push on that matter and have that discussion wherever it needs to be.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
The next opening was on the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee. The Boards and Commissions Committee will postpone the appointment while the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee continues working on a transition plan. We have heard about this transition plan for a while. They are making recommendations and meeting regularly to address that work. The last opening is for the Multimodal Transportation Commission. The Boards and Commissions Committee recommends the appointment of Elise Martyr, who also serves on the Neighborhood Advisory Committee. Can I get a second? Second. Any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it passes unanimously. In other boards and commissions, council committee business, the committee voted to support a change in the appointment process from monthly appointments to appointments 4 or 5 times a year. In addition, Planning and Zoning Commission and Buncombe County TDA appointments will remain in August due to the robust application process for these boards. The new process will begin with advertising of summer cycle appointments this week for appointments in June. April appointments will take place as usual so as not to delay the planned appointments without full and robust communication in the new process. And I also just wanted to personally say thank you to the clerk's office staff. We've been working on ways to support our boards and commissions and to the volunteers who are working through the realignment process by extending our openings for our board advisory appointments. It means that we'll be able to do outreach with publications, for example, that have monthly deadlines, like the Urban News, and to do effective translation for outreach with Ola Carolina, La Noticia, JM Pro. It also gives us an opportunity to bolster support and training for our advisory board members. And that concludes the Boards and Commissions Committee business.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Roney. Okay, we have reached our general public comment. Do we have closed session? We do.
We do.
Like a really brief one?
Relatively. 4 hours.
Okay. So we have 3 people signed up under our general public comment, and again, 3 minutes to speak. Each, Nina Tovish.
It wasn't my plan, but apparently this evening I'm the Debbie Downer. I apologize in advance. I'd like to briefly make some comments about one of the hot topics of recent weeks, which has been concern about safety and theft and vandalism and littering and other encroachments and disturbances downtown. And I want to be clear that by no means am I saying that assaults or vandalism are okay and that folks should somehow just live with them. That's not the tenor of what I have to offer this evening. I acknowledge it is indisputably distressing and sometimes scary to see our fellow human beings behaving erratically or that they're visibly down and out and somehow at risk. It makes us realize how vulnerable we all are, how easily we too, given bad circumstances, could slip through the safety net and become pitiful outcasts. As mentioned earlier this evening, much of our population is one medical catastrophe away from bankruptcy, one lost job away from homelessness, one bad choice away from addiction, family estrangement, and loss of social support. And frankly, no one wants to be reminded of that. It's scary. It would be much nicer not to be reminded of the harsh realities of our broken systems. The people who are defecating on the street aren't doing it because they want to. It's not fun. They're doing it because right now we have no public toilet facilities that are easily available. Or they're doing it because they're too sick or strung out to control their bowels, too out of it to find a discreet corner. The tweaking guy you encounter is much more likely to harm himself than you. Of course, it's scary to see someone who appears to have lost control. The reality, he didn't and most likely won't harm anyone. That's the statistical fact of the matter. But it's the visibility that causes the feelings of vulnerability. The visibility should be propelling us to action, to an acknowledgement of the ways that our society is failing so many, and a commitment to redressing those harms. Criminalization and punishment are not the answer, although they may comfort some by reinforcing the idea that those at the margins of society are all bad people and somehow deserve the horrible, desperate conditions they find themselves in. These are human beings, just like us. They don't deserve to be swept under the rug, to be chased further into the darkness, to be ground up in the brutal mill of the carceral system.
Thank you. Kalani Jackson.
Hi guys, I'm Kalani Jackson. I'm a former Miss Asheville, and I'm here today because 2 weeks ago, I own a salon, and one of my coworkers, she lost her mother on Hendersonville Road. August 17, 2022, I was thrown out of my vehicle. I broke my hand in 3 places. I broke my wrist, and I have had 3 compression back fractures. My car was docked going 30 miles per hour, and I was hit at 80 miles per hour, the gentleman that hit me. What I'm noticing is there's a lot of accidents happening on Hendersonville Road. It scares me. This is my community that I love so much, but when I get out on Hendersonville Road, I kind of say, Jesus, take the wheel because of what's happened. The week of Miss Sheila's death, there were 2 accidents that happened on that road that week. What I'm coming to you guys to talk about is maybe coming up with a plan. I know in bigger cities, you see where traffic lights catch the cars going like super fast and they write them tickets. I was wondering if maybe that could happen, because if it happens, people will know, hey, I need to slow down on Hendersonville Road because they write tickets. Or a traffic team, or possibly lowering the speed limit. This has just been like very traumatic for me, this experience, and I don't want it happening to someone else. I see the hurt that her family is experiencing. That's my salon family at work, so I experience that as well. Also, me being in a car accident, I understand that getting in a car, it's not a joke, it's not a game. Our infrastructure, we have so many beautiful people moving to the mountains. We're working on I-26, I believe, or 40 West, one of those. But I know that a lot of people travel on Sweeten Creek Road, they travel on Hendersonville Road, so if we can start with one of our main busiest roads in Asheville, maybe that will help prevent this. So that's why I'm here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
So just so it's on the council's radar, I know we don't make comments on public comment, but the MPO is going to be addressing prioritization of funding for I-26 Sweeten Creek, Swannanoa River Road. And we also have a Hendersonville Road project, but it's something to keep an eye on.
Good to know. And red light cameras, I think, is what you were talking about, and we can provide more information about that, but North Carolina has a little bit of a tricky issue legislatively around red light cameras, but I think what Councilwoman Roney is talking about, and both Councilwoman Ullman and Roney serve on our regional MPO, which is our transportation planning body. These roads are on DOT roads, but they're on their project list and we've had several, I think, fatalities on Hendersonville Road as recently. So stay tuned for more on that, and we appreciate you coming down here to talk to us about this. And then the last person signed up to speak under general public comment is Jonathan Wainscott.
I did.
All right, my name's Jonathan Wainscott, citizen reporter, reporting for duty. I wanted to look at our last meeting. City council meeting was moved up to 4 o'clock so that everybody who wanted to be here and also attend the Ta-Nehisi Coates lecture at UNCA could be there. Ta-Nehisi Coates is the author of The Case for Reparations. And when he was asked if he had any specific recommendations for our reparations process here, he said, according to the reporting, I wasn't there, he said, this is my first time in Asheville. I just flew in today. Far be it for me to sit back and recommend to you guys who are enmeshed in this on a daily basis. The Case for Reparations is an article that's built on reporting, and I haven't done the requisite and required research and reporting to have an understanding to make a recommendation. Of course, this reporting of this, nationally renowned author was covered by a guy named Johnny Casey. I've never heard of him. He's a Madison County reporter, hasn't written anything for the Citizen Times. Usually Joel Burgess and Sarah Anosky, I guess she split. But there's been a lot of history spoken here at City Council, and I think our reporters should do a better job of it. Of course, our local press does have a history of causing harm to the black community here in Asheville. This is from the 1800s, but I can find instances in the 20th and 21st century of that. And then another interesting thing in the news this week was that we've got here in Buncombe County 40 outstanding or pending murder cases in the judicial docket over there. Some of these cases are going back to 2020. It's 2023 already. That's crazy. Not to be outdone, we have an arson case in which the suspect was arrested on March 15th. Tomorrow will be the 4-year anniversary of that for the January 12th, 2019 burning of a really beautiful 2003 Toyota Celica GTS with a 6-speed manual transmission and its rad trim package and a sunroof and a killer stereo. And the next court date will be April 3rd, 2023, but there won't be a trial on that. And who knows, maybe this year something will get resolved with this, because I know, my sources tell me that the victim is really, really annoyed with this having happened. As you can see, this is a picture of that fire. I know that vehicular emissions break your heart, Maggie, and this is right next to a house right there. So who knows? Maybe this will happen this year. This case will get tried, but who knows? It's the Buncombe County Courthouse. You can never really rely on them to be prompt about just about anything. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, that concludes our general public comment. Council, we have a closed session. Brad says it's going to be really fast.
I move that the Asheville City Council go into closed session for the following reasons. 1, to prevent disclosure of information that is privileged and confidential pursuant to the laws of North Carolina or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11, parentheses A1. The laws that make the information privileged and confidential are NC General Statute 143-318.10E. And 2, to consult with an attorney employed by the city about matters with respect to which the attorney-client privilege between the city and its attorney must be preserved, including but not limited to the handling of the following matters. Matthew Roos versus City of Asheville and Brett L. Faust, civil action number 1:22-CV- 4 zeros and then a 5. The statutory authority authorizations contained in North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3.
Second, did you need a second? That was a thing, right?
Yeah.
That was the motion, so you
Yeah,
made a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Good night,
And
everyone.
we will adjourn from the closed session.